Chapter 35. Changing from Arrogance to Humility, 3. Seeing Gentle Snow smile with confidence, Feng was already snickering in silence. Sheep's wool comes from a sheep. If you wish to earn money, it was natural to obtain it from a wealthy person. A first-rate guild like Ouroboros was unquestionably an appropriate target. According to Feng's knowledge, the guild, Ouroboros, had already conquered over 10 virtual reality games. However, the appearance of God's domain had shaken the virtual gaming world. It was dubbed as mankind's second world. It caused the collapse of many other virtual reality games. Afterward, countless companies started madly investing in God's domain, nurturing their guild, growing their influence, and building their place in the virtual financial world. Naturally, Ouroboros also invested in God's domain. They too wanted to share a bite of the countless assets. Also, Ouroboros was not just wealthy, it also had a great background. The number of experts working under Ouroboros exceeded over 1,000. These 1,000 men were famed as the God-slaying army in God's domain. The existence of these 1,000 experts allowed Ouroboros to establish a large virtual empire. They unified over 80 cities in God's domain that each had a population of over 1 million players. Ouroboros was a true tyrant in God's domain. During Ouroboros' peak, it was the equivalent to the entire Starmoon Kingdom. As for Shadow, it had only established 10 cities that did not have populations exceeding 1 million players. In such a way, Ouroboros had become a peerless tyrant in the real world. Their position was truly unimaginable. It should be known that Starmoon Kingdom was a relatively large kingdom, even amongst the hundreds present in God's domain. It was at the upper middle ranks. One could clearly see Ouroboros' prowess when compared to it. How could Feng not wish to work with such a powerful guild? It was just the risk of working with Gentle Snow was too high. Because of her particular identity, the information she could get a hold of was just too great. Feng could not help but be cautious of her. It was why he intentionally revealed some hints, especially with the recipe for the basic strength potion. He wanted to see Gentle Snow's reaction. If she behaved in a bad way, Feng would naturally act ignorant and push all responsibility away. However, the present situation was undoubtedly the one Feng looked forward to the most. Since you've already explained, my asking price isn't high. 20 silver coins. Feng calmly stated. To a small guild of current times, 20 silver coins would already be their entire fortune. Even a 100-man money farming group would need 2 to 3 days to collect such an amount. Zhao Yueru sucked in a cold breath, nearly jumping up when she heard Feng casually ask for 20 silver coins. She stared at Feng furiously saying, "Why don't you just rob someone? That would be a faster way." "I would do it if I could get that much money," Feng said with a smile. "You should know there is a lot of skill books, weapons and equipment for players inside the Deathly Forest. They can quickly increase the strength of players. If you could conquer the Deathly Forest a step earlier, the benefits it would bring towards future developments go without saying." Can't you make it a little cheaper? 20 silvers? Even we Ouroboros can't simply take out that much money. Zhao Yueru thoroughly disliked Feng now. However, when she thought about the importance of the Deathly Forest, she still used a softer tone to speak to Feng. "Sorry, but no negotiations. If you don't agree to it, then I can only consider working with some other guild." Feng remained firm with his decision. He had been very sincere in dealing with Gentle Snow. If it was still not possible, he could only consider the Assassin's Alliance. The Assassin's Alliance was wealthy and imposing. Before, they spent over 20 silvers to buy Feng's level 5 bronze shield. "I understand. 20 silvers then. However, we need some time to collect the money. After all, our Ouroboros area of influence isn't in White River City, but at the capital, Starmoon City. There are only a few Ouroboros members close to White River City. Give me a day's time, take these 7 silvers as a deposit. I will compensate you with 15 silvers a day later." Gentle Snow had never imagined Feng's appetite would be so great. 20 silvers was still a lot to her. However, the importance of clearing the Deathly Forest was too great. They had to grasp it as soon as possible. At the same time, Gentle Snow knew that silver coins were precious during the early periods of the game. Hence, she had given a little more to Feng as interest. "All right. Here is the map of the Deathly Forest, and also the things you need to pay attention to when fighting against the boss." Feng also knew what Gentle Snow had said was true. Wanting to gather 20 silver coins would not be easy. Ouroboros did not have as great of influence in White River City as the Assassin's Alliance did. Feng sent mail to Gentle Snow containing detailed introductions to the Deathly Forest. With Gentle Snow's abilities, they should be able to clear normal mode easily. Gentle Snow looked at the strategy she received for the Deathly Forest. Her heart slightly shook only after a slight glance. She never imagined the Deathly Forest would be so horrifying. Just the number of paths available already numbered 36. 33 of them were dead ends. There was even a Night Ranger who moved based on opportunity. There was also a detailed description of the boss and when it would cast its skills. She definitely got more than 20 silvers worth of information. If she sent others to explore the paths bit by bit, the cost would exceed 20 silvers. Suddenly, another change occurred to Gentle Snow's perception of Shifeng. She felt Shifeng was not as simple as he seemed to be. He was certainly an expert. Only an expert could have such a profound understanding of the dungeon. However, Gentle Snow had no recollection of an expert swordsman like Shifeng. In 3 days Ouroboros is planning to enter the first level 5 20-man dungeon, the Dark Moon Graveyard. I wonder if you will be interested in joining? Gentle Snow, beautiful eyes looked towards Shifeng as she invited him to the team dungeon. She already acknowledged Shifeng's strength. If Shifeng was with them, entering the team dungeon they might have an easier time in it. From aside, Blackie looked at Shifeng with dumbstruck eyes. His admiration for Shifeng had already reached the level of worship. He never imagined Shifeng would be so awesome as to conquer the snow goddess in a few moves. The goddess even wished to invite him to raid a dungeon. How great of an honor was this? There were countless men who dreamt of raiding a dungeon with the snow goddess. However, Zhao Yueru became irritated after hearing Gentle Snow invite him. Shifeng was but a beta tester. At most, he had experienced God's domain a few more days than they did and had a deeper understanding of the Deathly Forest. However, the 20-man team dungeon had only opened after the game's official release. It did not exist during the beta test, so there was no way for Shifeng to know anything about it. Also, Shifeng wasn't some powerful expert. What point would there be in inviting him? He would just be wasting a slot in the dungeon. Shifeng entered a thought. There were a lot of good items that dropped from a 20-man dungeon. It had been particularly true for the Dark Moon Graveyard, which dropped a lot of worthwhile equipment for swordsmen. The attributes of the equipment from that dungeon were also much better than the ones obtained from wild bosses. However, Shifeng was not able to organize a 20-man party, so it wouldn't be a disadvantage to join Gentle Snow for a round. Alright, but leave a few spots for me. Also, all swordsman equipment and forging designs must belong to me, Shifeng answered with a nod. Can't you be a little more humble? Zhao Yueru looked at Shifeng, pouting. She felt Shifeng was going too overboard. If Gentle Snow had asked anyone else, they would have readily agreed, even going as far as to forego getting any equipment. Shifeng, however, even wanted priority over equipment. He was not courteous with them at all. Gentle Snow did not imagine Shifeng was truly different from the other people. He did not play around with his words. However, it was interesting that he would say whatever he wanted. Following which, Gentle Snow looked towards the party members behind Shifeng. Although they were noobs, their equipment was all of good quality. They could barely manage in the 20-man dungeon. Thus Gentle Snow said, "Fine. Let's add each other as friends then. We'll be in touch when the time comes." Alright. You can just contact me a few hours before raiding the dungeon. I'll arrive on time. Shifeng accepted Gentle Snow's friend request. Subsequently, Shifeng and his party members left the small rock pit, heading towards Dark Moon Valley. When the group passed through the Deathly Forest dungeon, Stabbing Heart of the Assassin's Alliance abruptly called out to Shifeng. "Brother Yifeng, I nearly failed to recognize you. I never imagined you actually knew a big shot like the Snow Goddess. You must not forget a brother like me in the future." Stabbing Heart jokingly said as he walked towards Shifeng. "Nonsense. I just happened to meet with Miss Snow by chance," Shifeng replied with a smile. "Brother Yifeng, you are too humble. Based on your strength, you are absolutely worthy of becoming friends with the Snow Goddess. After all, both of you are experts of the same level." Stabbing Heart thought Shifeng was very humble. It was no wonder he was such a great expert. The way he conducted himself was different than ordinary people. Stabbing Heart wanted to befriend Shifeng even more now. "Our Assassin's Alliance is preparing to enter the dungeon. I wonder if Brother Yifeng would be interested in joining us? Of course, you can pick any of the equipment that you want." "You are too courteous, Brother Stabbing Heart. However, I still have some things to attend to. I will definitely join if there is another chance in the future." Shifeng politely rejected the offer. Stabbing Heart spoke in a loud voice. Surrounding players clearly heard his words. At first, everyone thought of Shifeng as just a noob. His being called upon by the snow goddess was just due to luck. Even now, Stabbing Heart of the Assassins Alliance wished to befriend Shi Feng. Just what sort of situation was this? The Assassins Alliance was a large guild that was famous throughout White River City. As the sub-leader of the guild's elite group, Stabbing Heart would not need to interact with normal players at all. However, he tried to befriend Shi Feng. Shi Feng had actually rejected him. Shi Feng was just too domineering. If someone were to call Shi Feng a noob, nobody would believe them. There was something strange about the situation. Everyone guessed that Shi Feng must be a hidden expert that normal players did not know of. Otherwise, why would big shots try to meet Shi Feng one after the other? Boss waving that Stabbing Heart actually tried to befriend that noob. I'm not dreaming, right? Wordless Summer Night was shocked. Was this Shi Feng really the noob they met before? Waving slowly but surely was currently upset in his heart. Initially, his heart still held hope that Shi Feng was just a noob. Now, however, that hope was utterly destroyed by Stabbing Heart. Shi Feng was not a noob. He was definitely an expert, just like Lonely Snow had said. Shi Feng might even be greater than Lonely Snow had described him to be. If Lonely Snow followed Shi Feng, then his future would certainly be filled with boundless prospects. On the other hand, they had chased Shi Feng away. They had missed a great chance for them to befriend an expert. Boss, why don't we go over and apologize? An expert is a magnanimous person. Who knows, he might even forgive us. At that time we too could gain the favor of an expert, Battle to the End suggested. Wordless Summer Night nodded his head in complete agreement. Just as Shi Feng's party was about to leave the deathly forest, waving slowly but surely and the others came running over. Big Brother Expert, we've had some misunderstandings before, so we're here to apologize to you. We hope you can forgive our ignorance. Here's a silver coin to show our sincerity. We hope Big Brother Expert can take us under your wing. Waving slowly was all smiles as he apologized. The arrogance he had before was completely gone now. Wordless Summer Night and Battle to the End were also sincerely apologizing without stop. They wished to grind monsters with Shi Feng. If you guys don't have anything else to say, then please leave. I still have matters to attend to, so I don't have any time to waste with you. Shi Feng spun around to leave after replying. He did not mind one little bit in regards to waving slowly and the others' previous behavior. However, wanting him to carry them? Not a chance. As for Lonely Snow, he only shook his head in regards to waving slowly and the others' actions. If they had known that their actions would lead to such results today, maybe they wouldn't have acted so in the beginning. Watching Lonely Snow leave with Shi Feng, Wordless Summer curled his lips into a frown, saying in a sour tone, "Bah. What's there to be amazed about? In the future I too will become an expert." However, only waving slowly knew Lonely Snow would become successful in the future. He was already in a different world than them. Chapter 36, Hazard Gnome. After leaving the deathly forest, Shi Feng's party rushed towards Dark Moon Valley without rest. At the current stage of the game, many players had already risen to level 2. Aside from raiding the dungeon at the Deathly Forest, they would stay in Brook Hills to kill level 2 cheetah cubs. Only a few experts would go to the level 4 area, Dark Moon Valley, to level up. However, along with the increase in player levels, it wouldn't be long before Dark Moon Valley would become occupied. After spending over half an hour returning to Dark Moon Valley, the scene they met with was the same as what Shi Feng expected. A few elite parties who were uninterested in the dungeon were currently killing level 4 kobolds that were wandering around the outer parts of the valley. These elite parties were quite skilled. They lured 2 or 3 monsters each time, with the shield warrior tanking in front and preventing the kobolds from closing in on their mage and healer. The healer was continuously healing from behind, barely maintaining the shield warrior's HP. Although it was taxing to grind in such a way, the gains from the fight were equally good. The 3 kobolds had dropped 2 coppers and some stone materials. In God's domain, only monsters level 3 and above would drop skill books and bronze equipment. Although the chance was only 10,000 to 1, it was still enough to cause players to go on wild goose chases. Currently, bronze equipment was very valuable, even more so were skill books. With these enticements here, there would be many experts who would come forth, even if there was some danger involved. After taking a few glances, Shi Feng turned and left towards the inner parts of the Dark Moon Valley. The other party members who were new to the Dark Moon Valley were very nervous. It was especially true when they saw the level 4 monsters scattered throughout the entire area. Their breaths became slightly hurried. However, Blackie was extremely calm when he saw these level 4 kobolds. After all, he had previously killed hundreds of them. He did not seem panicked, unlike the other party members. He simply followed Shifeng, entering the deeper regions of the valley. As for the elite parties, they could not help but be shocked when they saw Shifeng's party enter deep into the valley. They had never imagined the newcomer party would have such courage. There were very few players currently present in Dark Moon Valley. It had yet to be completely developed, so there were a lot of kobolds in the middle of the valley. The deeper one headed towards the center, the greater the number of kobolds. There would even be groups that consisted of 10 or more kobolds. Grinding monsters there was just too dangerous. The lowest number of kobolds they had to face was at least 4 or 5. It was not worth risking an unwarranted death. Unfortunately, these people did not know Shifeng was more insane than they previously thought. Shifeng did not just enter the deeper regions of the valley. Instead, he went towards the core of the Dark Moon Valley. There was a good location to grind monsters there. Not only was there a large number of monsters, but their respawn rate was quick as well. Most importantly, the drop rate therefore was high. Regarding understanding, Shifeng was like the local god of the area when it came to the Dark Moon Valley. Be it the location of the monsters, the number of monsters available, or their respawn time, Shifeng had spent countless hours researching in his previous life. His goal at that time was to increase the grinding speed of his party, all to improve his position within Shadow. Life was truly fascinating. Shifeng's sacrifice towards Shadow in his previous life had currently turned around to help himself instead. It could increase his own party's level more quickly, while at the same time guaranteeing him a steady supply of ore. Moving along the path of broken rocks, groups of 4 or 5 level 4 kobolds would occasionally appear. However, it was just a small matter with the equipment of Shifeng's party. Looking at the party's guardian knight, Kola, be it with HP or defense, he could easily tank 4 kobolds at the same time. The healer, Drowsy Sloth, could maintain Kola's HP above 80% without wasting much effort. If Kola had let a monster pass, then Lonely Snow would go up and push it back. As for the others, they would fervently deal damage. A simple sword strike from Shifeng could already deal over 100 damage, whereas Blackie's dark arrows could each deal 88 damage. The fight could not get any easier than this. Within moments, the 5 kobolds were all dealt with. Compared to the elite party outside, Shifeng's party was stronger by several folds. Shifeng simply picked up the stone materials and/or that dropped, then continuing deeper into the Dark Moon Valley. After spending over an hour moving forward, Shifeng's party had finally arrived in front of a mountain. The massive mountain was hundreds of meters in height. Kobolds no longer filled the area surrounding the mountain. Wandering gnomes had replaced them. These wandering gnomes each held a small shovel in their hands, using it to dig into the rock wall of the mountain. There were also quite a few gnome overseers that inspected the surrounding areas with a whip in hand. Brother Feng, the monsters here are just too numerous. Are we really going to grind here? Blackie's heart shook slightly when he took a look around. He discovered hundreds of wandering gnomes around the vast mountain. There was even a few level 5 gnome overseers. Compared to the groups of over 10 kobolds outside, this place was a literal battlefield. Kola also gulped down a mouthful of saliva, worriedly saying, "Party leader, I'm not trying to boast, but tanking 6 or 7 of them is my limit. I really can't manage this many monsters." It wasn't just Blackie or Kola. The others as well were apprehensive. Wandering gnomes occupied the entire mountain, and these gnomes were very close to each other. As long as they made a mistake while luring, then they would have to face off against hundreds of level 4 monsters. Such a large number of monsters was much scarier than the Lord rank felt. I know you guys can't fend all of them off. However, whoever said about letting any of you tank hundreds of gnomes? Shifeng rolled his eyes at his party members. He was extremely clear regarding the party's standards. Facing off against 10 gnomes at the same time was nearly their limit, so how could they deal with hundreds at the same time? Even a level 10 player would be finished when met with hundreds if level 4 monsters. However, wasn't there a good saying that stated, if you can't outfight them, outrun them? Shifeng's agility had reached 30 points. Including the bronze shoes he had, his movement speed had exceeded the wandering gnomes by at least 4 points. He could easily kite the gnomes and let Blackie use the AoE skill, Hell Flame. The efficiency of grinding in such a way was several times greater than that of killing individually. Following which, Shifeng told everyone about his plan. He needed Blackie to get the timing right, maximizing the effect of Hell Flame. As for the others, they were responsible for taking out the gnomes with low HP. When Shifeng had chosen his position, he grabbed a handful of stones and rushed towards the nearby gnome overseer. Just as Shi Feng approached the 20-yard distance, the overseer had started yelling loudly. Its screams attracted the attention of many of the surrounding wandering gnomes. Shi Feng waited first for a moment, avoiding the whip of the gnome overseer and allowing the wandering gnomes to continuously gather. When about 30 gnomes had gathered, Shi Feng turned around and ran in the opposite direction. Afterward, he threw a small stone that struck another gnome overseer. The overseer who was struck loudly bellowed, bringing along over 20 of its brethren and rushing at Shi Feng. Within moments, Shi Feng had lured over 60 monsters. However, Shi Feng was not yet satisfied. He started circling the mountain as he lured monsters, and within 5 minutes, there were hundreds of wandering gnomes and more than 10 gnome overseers chasing behind him with all their might. Unfortunately for them, Shi Feng's equipment was just too good. His speed was 30% greater when compared to the gnomes. Including Shi Feng's extraordinary techniques and control over his body, he was able to toy with the gnomes whichever way he wanted. "Blackie, get ready to cast," Shi Feng reminded. "All right." Blackie was extremely excited. This was his first time using AoE magic, so he did not know what kind of effects it would have. Subsequently, Blackie's fingers started gesturing in midair. Brilliant magical seals started appearing, forming into a dazzling magic circle that gave off a peerless aura. As Blackie spat out the last syllable, the land shook. Jade green flames rushed to the sky, devouring the entire gnome army. A field of damages over 100 had appeared. Within 5 seconds, every gnome chasing after Shi Feng received over 200 damage, their remaining HP less than half. However, the target of these gnomes had also changed. They no longer went after Shi Feng but Blackie instead. Shi Feng abruptly stopped. He pulled out the abyssal blade and rushed forward. Thundering Flash. Not only did the level 4 Thundering Flash have a low cooldown, but its attack range also increased to 15 by 3 yards. It had nearly covered the entire gnome army. 3 streaks of thunder flew past the gnome army, creating 3 damages of over 120 points to every gnome. The attack had completely devoured the remaining HP of the gnomes. As for the low HP ones that remained, they were quickly held back by Cola. Lonely Snow then rushed forward and used a whirlwind slash, thoroughly ending the remaining gnomes. The hundreds of gnomes had been wiped out, leaving behind a floor covered with items. Meanwhile, everyone's experience madly rose. EXP of over 10 points appeared one after the other, dazzling everyone's eyes. Wah! Blackie had risen to level 3. "This is too awesome." Blackie roared in exhilaration. "This is only the beginning. They will still respawn in a moment." Shi Feng laughed, "Let's quickly pick up the drops." Suddenly, everyone started busying themselves. Even with 6 people retrieving the drops, the loot of hundreds of gnomes still required them to spend a lot of time doing so. However, moments after they started collecting, a gnome that piloted a gigantic robot suddenly appeared. The gnome's face was crimson red. It immediately rushed toward Shi Feng's party with unparalleled rage. "Not good. It's the hazard gnome." Everyone spread out. Shi Feng shouted the moment he laid eyes on the gigantic robot. Chapter 37 Rocket Boots. The moment everyone saw the giant robot piloted by a midget gnome, they instinctively knew he was something very dangerous. After hearing Shi Feng's reminder, they ignored the loot on the ground and immediately ran towards the forest without a shred of hesitation. Naturally, Shi Feng would not stay behind either. The hazard gnome was a very dangerous monster. It was especially true when he first made his appearance. He was even stronger than Werewolf felt with its Death Berserk activated. Hazard Gnome, Special Elite. Level 5. HP 1600/1600. There was a very small chance for the Hazard Gnome to appear after clearing out the wandering gnomes and gnome overseers. However, his appearance also signified the start of a player's nightmare. There was a saying in God's domain that warns people not to look down on gnomes just because they were midgets. If they were enraged, they could easily extinguish your life at any given moment. In his previous life, Shi Feng met the Hazard Gnome once before. At that time he was with an elite party who was grinding for ore. After killing the gnomes, the Hazard Gnome appeared. They did not imagine they would meet a special elite, so they had all excitedly rushed at him. However, the situation ended up in a tragedy for the 20-man party. The Hazard Gnome's 1600 HP must not be taken lightly. His defense was an abnormality, capable of reducing 80% of the damage he received. A level 4 berserker using an axe could only take 2 HP from the gnome. On the other hand, the hazard gnome's attacks were even more powerful. Everyone would get a free trip back to the city after he fired a burst of bullets. Although Shifeng's party had tried their best to run away, the hazard gnome's hatred for their evil deeds was clearly implacable. The rockets on the robot's back suddenly ignited. The steel machine that was over 3 meters tall rushed at high speed towards Shifeng's party. While being chased, Blackie attacked with his dark arrow as he ran. Although the arrow had struck the hazard gnome, it had only caused a meager -4 damage. Blackie's eyes widened when he saw the damage. He said in a dumbstruck manner, "Disgusting. If the robot wasn't protecting this gnome, I could one-shot him anytime. Don't mind it for now and focus on running. Pay attention to dodging the bullets. As long as we are 1,200 yards away from the mountain, the hazard gnome will return." Shifeng never thought, just after a lecture from him, Blackie's skill would improve to the degree of being able to hit his target while moving. However, fighting head-on with the hazard gnome would be very foolish. Blackie understood Shifeng's intentions. He turned around and started chanting Evil Whip, binding the pursuing hazard gnome with 5 thorns and greatly reducing the gnome's speed. With this, everyone managed to gain quite a distance from the gnome. When the hazard gnome broke free from the 5 thorns, high damages of -23, -24, -23, -23, -24 suddenly appeared on his head. His HP had turned to 1479 within an instant. The damage caused by the evil whip was just ridiculous. Blackie was shocked. Before, his level 3 dark arrow had only dealt -4 damage. On the other hand, the evil whip had caused over 100 damage total. The difference between them was just too great. Did the hazard gnome have that kind of fetish? Shifeng saw hope when the hazard gnome's HP suddenly fell by a portion. The hazard gnome did not have any immunity towards plant-based attacks. Shifeng immediately commanded, "Everybody stop running. Cola, get the hazard gnome's hatred and let his back face toward the group. The others attack and mind your positions. As long as the hazard gnome lifts up his gun, immediately dodge the muzzle. Blackie, attack immediately after Evil Whip's CD finishes. We have a chance to get rid of him." Whether they would live or die before they ran out of the 1,200-yard mark was an uncertainty. So why not fight it out? Who knows, they might even be able to get rid of this hazard gnome. In Shifeng's previous life, there were no players who killed the hazard gnome before. If they were to kill him now, something good might drop. Currently, the hazard gnome's hatred was targeted towards Blackie. However, Lonely Snow was a step ahead of the gnome, using charge on him. He used a whirlwind slash on the gnome, causing 3 points of damage. Although the damage was low, the momentary fainted state it caused gave Cola a chance to use Divine Strike, followed by Punishment. The 2 attacks caused -3, -2 damage, and the additional hatred they attracted had the hazard gnome locked onto Cola. The hazard gnome extended the electric saw on the robot's right arm, violently slashing at Cola. Cola blocked the attack with his shield. His body retreated 3 steps backward and a damage of -147 appearing above his head. Cola was shocked. When the next attack from the electric saw came, he hurriedly dodged and rolled to the side, avoiding the attack completely. Drowsy Sloth immediately healed Cola twice, returning close to 100 HP to Cola. Such fierce damage, Lonely Snow was shocked as well. He no longer dared to stay, turning around and running more than 10 yards away from the gnome. He would definitely die, even if he were only struck once by the electric saw. On the other hand, Shifeng was not afraid of him. He immediately arrived at the hazard gnome's back, using out a series of skills: Thundering Flash, Double Chop, and Chop. The occasional critical hit would also cause -16 damage. Compared to the others, Shifeng's damage was already very high. However, the hazard gnome only gave a look of contempt towards Shifeng's attacks. He continued using his electric saw to attack Cola. A series of fierce attacks had forced Cola to constantly retreat backward. His HP was continuously falling as well. Behind, Drowsy Sloth's healing could not keep up with the damage Cola was receiving. He could only watch as Cola inched closer to death. At the most crucial moment, Shifeng used Abyssal Bind. 9 pitch-black chains bound the hazard gnome, giving Cola a breather. Within the 3 seconds, the hazard gnome had only lost 7% of his HP after being barraged by everyone's attacks. The total damage the party dealt was not even the equivalent of a single evil whip from Blackie. When the 3 seconds had ended, the hazard gnome regained his freedom. The green-skinned gnome revealed a mocking smile on his face. his tiny hands moving around and manipulating buttons. The robot's arm holding the electric saw made a roundabout slash, creating a beautiful arc. Shifeng's entire person was sent flying. He smashed into a tree and lost 286 HP. Cola rushed up in a hurry, his HP having recovered by more than half. He used Divine Strike and Punishment once again, trying to pull back the Hazard Gnome's hatred. However, the Hazard Gnome had actually ignored Cola. Instead, he lifted the gun in his left hand, aimed it and fired a burst of bullets at Shifeng. A barrage of densely packed bullets flew towards Shifeng. However, Shifeng had yet to land after being sent flying, so it was impossible to dodge the bullets. Phantom kill. Shifeng's doppelganger instantly appeared before him. The doppelganger waved his blade, continuously blocking the bullets. Meanwhile, Shifeng had already activated gravity liberation. He jumped up to a treetop, avoiding the attack range of the Hazard Gnome. However, his doppelganger had already been killed. After finishing a cartridge of bullets, the Hazard Gnome started changing magazines. Afterward, he continued to rush at Shifeng. Everyone else could only continue attacking, shaving away the Hazard Gnome's HP bit by bit. However, Shifeng was not easy to hit after he activated gravity liberation. Shifeng also used the trees for protection. He was barely dodging the flying bullets as he continued kiting the gnome. As for Blackie, he would immediately use Evil Whip as soon as it was ready. The Hazard Gnome's HP continuously fell, 64%, 50%, 30%, 20%, 10%. When only 10% of the Hazard Gnome's HP remained, the gnome suddenly jumped out of the metallic machine. He wore a pair of rocket boots and started to escape. It can't be. Monsters can actually escape? Blackie watched as the Hazard Gnome ran with extreme speed to a location without people. The others were also shocked. They never imagined the gnome would have such a high intelligence. He ran the moment he knew he could not win the fight. We can't let him escape. We will have fought for nothing otherwise. Cola immediately chased after the gnome. He had been bullied by the Hazard Gnome just a moment ago, so his heart was currently filled with anger. How could he let the Hazard Gnome escape after having taken advantage of them? You want to escape? Not a chance. Shifeng chased after him with Wind Blade. However, the Hazard Gnome was unperturbed. He sent Shifeng a mocking expression before pressing a button on his waist. The rocket boots spewed out large amounts of flames, ready to fly away. Chapter 38, Twin Snake Ring. The Hazard Gnome's shameless rocket boots shocked everyone. They had never seen a monster that was so good at escaping before. Its human-like expressions and actions were completely different from NPCs. The Hazard Gnome was like a person pretending to be an NPC. 2 streaks of crimson flame flared, slowly lifting the Hazard Gnome into the air. Unwillingness filled everyone's hearts. However, they could no longer stop it, but only watched the Hazard Gnome flee with their own eyes. The mages in the party were over 40 yards away from the Hazard Gnome. Lonely Snow as well was over 30 yards apart from it. It was not within the range of charge. Also, the faint effect of charge would become ineffective because the target was floating in midair. Only the movement speed increase would take effect. Currently, only Shifeng was close to the Hazard Gnome. He was only 15 yards away from it. However, Shifeng did not have any range attacks. Even if he chased after it, the Hazard Gnome would raise over 20 yards from the ground by the time he arrived. In the end, Shifeng would only watch the Hazard Gnome escape. 9 Dragon Slash. Shifeng knew he could not catch up. He waved the abyssal blade, shrouded in black mist, in his hand. Within an instant, 9 streaks of black mist shot towards the Hazard Gnome. Shifeng was not willing to allow such a smart Hazard Gnome leave. Initially, Shifeng only thought of the Hazard Gnome as an average special elite. He had never imagined the gnome to be so much like a player. Throughout his 10 years of playing God's Domain, Shifeng rarely saw such intelligent gnomes. The main God system wouldn't simply bestow a small monster with high intelligence. Such bestowals usually had a deeper meaning behind them. For example, those human heroes or legendary beings were all great characters. Their existences caused people to shudder. Although the intelligence of this Hazard Gnome did not reach the level of those heroes or legendary beings, he was still much smarter than a boss monster. There might even be unimaginable gains by killing it. Currently, the Hazard Gnome's displayed information changed. He suddenly became Arcus Maddox. Arcus Maddox, Lord rank. Level 5. HP 600/600. Shifeng felt a sense of familiarity when he saw this name. It seems that he had heard of it before, yet he could not recall anything about it. However, the gnome only had 600 HP. Shifeng was confident he could kill the gnome with the 9 Dragon's Slash. Just when the 9 sword shadows were about to pierce Arcus Maddix, the gnome took out a few steel balls from his small bag. He threw the balls at the phantoms of the abyssal blade. Brilliant sparks flared up the moment the two attacks came into contact. A series of explosions forced the phantoms of the abyssal blade back. Just when the phantoms were prepared to attack Arcus Maddix once more, he immediately flew over 30 yards away. Meanwhile, the 9 phantoms of the abyssal blade could only attack targets within 30 yards of its reach. Shifeng could only watch helplessly as Arcus Maddix escaped. Crap. How could there be such a monster? His escaping ability is just a bug. Blackie stared at the fleeing Arcus Maddix as he cursed. Cola was grinding his teeth in hatred as well, sending a few punches towards a nearby tree. The other party members felt displeasure also. Everyone fought long and hard against this elite monster. However, just when they were about to reap the rewards of their efforts, their prize grew wings and flew away. Was there anything more depressing? Brother Feng, let's continue chasing it. Blackie discovered that the gnome's movement speed was not fast. Also, there should be a limited amount of fuel powering that pair of boots. Who knows, the gnome might land just after a while. Forget it. Let's continue grinding gnomes. Shifeng shook his head. If they could chase the gnome, Shifeng would have long since chased after it. However, the gnome's rocket boots were just too powerful. It was titled as one of God's domain's godly escape tools. Currently, the boots had just been activated. Its speed would abruptly increase in a moment, and the gnome would disappear in the blink of an eye. It would be an impossible task if they wished to find the gnome. As expected, the flames gushing out from the rocket boots greatly increased after a moment. Shio. Arcus Maddix disappeared from the air, unable to be seen anymore. Best not let us meet again. You can dream of escaping the next time. Blackie said in an unfortunate tone as he looked towards the spot where Arcus Maddix had disappeared. In his heart, Shifeng felt that it was a pity to let the gnome go. However, it would no longer be dangerous when they grinded on wandering gnomes from now on. After this experience, the hazard gnome most likely would not show himself ever again. Let's go, continue grinding on the wandering gnomes. Shifeng turned around and said to his party. Brother Feng, you're still the best. How could I not think of it? If we killed all of this bastard's kinsmen, we'll see if he doesn't show up again. Blackie laughingly said. Shifeng was speechless. He turned around and left, no longer paying any attention to the fantasizing Blackie. Suddenly Shifeng stopped his feet in shock. Damn, our luck really is too poor. I never thought that Arcus Maddix would actually appear here, and he was also a level 5 hazard gnome. Shifeng tightly clenched his fists, his brows wrinkled. It was the first time he became so enraged. When everyone looked at Shifeng's wrathful expression, they could faintly feel the surroundings become chilly. They could not help but retreat a step, their foreheads covered in a cold sweat. Before, they felt Shifeng was a calm and easygoing person. Never would they have imagined Shifeng would become so terrifying after becoming angry. The forest around them no longer seemed lively but more like a frozen hell, silent, cold, and dark. Brother Feng, are you all right? Blackie carefully asked. He was shocked. Shifeng was completely different from when he was mad or arguing with others. It was the first time Blackie saw Shifeng enraged to such a degree. Oh, it's nothing. Shifeng reacted, replying with a smile. He stored back the dense killing intent into his heart. Such killing intent was slowly honed throughout the years Shifeng had played God's domain. Compared to the tyrant bear Cola of 10 years in the future, there was nothing special about Shifeng's killing intent. However, at present, it was considered unbearable for Blackie and the others. Shifeng finally recalled the name of Arcus Maddix. Arcus Maddix was a famous Grandmaster engineer within God's domain. 3 years after Arcus Maddix shocked the nation by creating the Sky Fortress, Twin Snake Ring, he had gone on to establish the Gnome Empire. With it, the new update, Emergence of the New World, also activated. At that time, countless superguilds started expeditions towards the fortress, Twin Snake Ring. However, all of them were annihilated, and Arcus Maddix was the cause of such a result. On the other hand, Shifeng was completely unaware of a great character had appeared right before his eyes. He also lost the chance to kill Arcus Maddix, so how could Shifeng not be enraged? Party leader, there's a box here. Did it drop from Arcus Maddix during the explosions? Gluttonous Mouse, who had been silent all this while, asked as he picked up a small metallic box from the grass. Shifeng received the box and took a look at it. He discovered the words Archismatics carved onto the metallic box. Shortly after Shifeng opened the box, he said suddenly with a laugh, "Great! Good job, Mouse. With this, we didn't fight for nothing after all." When the group saw Shifeng in a happy mood, they knew the item must be very precious, as common items were nothing in Shifeng's eyes. As to wanting the item for themselves, none of them ever had such thoughts. They had long since made Shifeng their idol, and being able to aid their idol naturally made them happy. "Let's do it this way. You guys stay here to grind and level up. I still have something that needs to be done. Notify me when you have all reached level 4. Shifeng kept the metallic box and hastily made the arrangements. Nobody could help him with the following matter. Only Shifeng was able to proceed. Everyone felt reluctant when they heard Shifeng's command. However, hearing Shifeng have plans for them after they reached level 4, their anticipation grew as they abided Shifeng's arrangements. Subsequently, Shifeng left the deeper regions of the Dark Moon Valley. The party had Blackie's AoE skill. Killing 7 or 8 gnomes at a time was no problem at all, and their leveling speed was at least 2 or 3 times faster than the other parties. On the other hand, what Shifeng needed to do was to utilize this metallic box, and to forward the first step of his plans in God's domain. Chapter 39, Philosopher's Stone. After leaving the Dark Moon Valley, Shifeng rushed towards Scarlet Lake. He had also activated gravity liberation to save more time. The players on their way to the Dark Moon Valley saw Shifeng speeding past them like a gale of wind. His speed was shockingly fast and his figure was just a blur. Who is that person? Which assassin is he? His speed is so fast. No, look at his waist. That's a sword hanging there, not a dagger. He should be a swordsman. Crap. Are the current swordsmen that OP? The widely spread rumor on the forums stated that a mysterious swordsman killed the mayor of Red Leaf Town. There was also a powerful swordsman at the Deathly Forest that received an invitation from the Snow Goddess. I would have played as a swordsman if I had known about this earlier. Say, do you think they're the same person? Definitely not. I saw the swordsman that killed the mayor. That male swordsman was as big as a black bear. His arms alone were thicker than our thighs. He had forcefully killed that level 15 mayor. The players passing by started a discussion as they watched Shifeng depart. They were inwardly speechless towards the swordsman job. They should have played as swordsman if there was such a powerful job. However, it was too late now. Shifeng might have laughed it off if he had known their thoughts. There was no strongest job in God's domain, only the strongest player. Shifeng ran for over 2 hours through the vast plains. He activated gravity liberation over tens of times, escaping the pursuit of high-leveled monsters. He passed through the level 6 map, Wolfman's Ruins, and the level 8 map, Oro Fort, before arriving in the level 10 area, Scarlet Lake. Scarlet Lake was the playground of level 10 water elementals and little fishmen. Watching from a high location, Shifeng could see groups of little fishmen patrolling. The closer it was to the Scarlet Lake, the more there were of little fishmen. The central region of the Scarlet Lake was the nest of the little fishmen, whereas annoying water elementals filled the water of the lake. Due to the densely packed and large number of monsters in the Scarlet Lake, the little fishman's curse skill was extremely horrendous. It could absorb a player's attributes and turned it into their own. The longer they fought, the stronger they would become. They were extremely hard to kill. Including the fact that there were no quests here, there were rarely any players who would willingly come here to level up. However, Shifeng had to enter into the deeper regions of the Scarlet Lake. The metal box dropped by Archismatics was extremely precious. If Archismatics were to know it fell into Shifeng's hands, he would most likely bleed out in rage. There was a treasure map inside the box, and the treasure it hid was located at Scarlet Lake. Shifeng had played God's domain for over 10 years now. He had done extensive research regarding the history of God's domain. He truly did not think Archismatics would have this treasure map. It was the record of a heaven-shaking secret. 900 years ago, Alchemy Master Molotov had created an item with all his effort. Wars were waged between the large countries in God's domain for this item. There were over 10 heroic figures that fought over it. However, this item became lost in the end, its whereabouts unknown. It had become an unsolved mystery in God's domain. Meanwhile, the treasure map in Shifeng's hands, by chance, recorded the location of this item. This item was the Philosopher's Stone. It was a sacred item for alchemy. If alchemists could obtain the Philosopher's Stone, then they would have the ability to transform stone into gold, amassing immense wealth. They would even be able to revive the dead, breaking the alchemy law of equivalent exchange. Who would have thought such a sacred item would be placed in such an unremarkable location as Scarlet Lake? If he waited until he was level 7 or 8, someone else might claim the item. He wouldn't even be able to feel regret when that time came. Shi Feng took out the metal box from his bag, carefully taking out the treasure map within it. He started researching it in detail. The marking on the treasure map was very clear. The treasure was located directly below the little fishman's nest. However, how would Shi Feng be able to circle around all these little fishmen? The problem with the water elementals also needed to be solved. Although water elementals had low HP, they had a 60% immunity to physical attacks. They also had a movement speed reduction skill, so they were a headache for melee players. After observing for half an hour, Shi Feng discovered that the little fishmen were not always on patrol. They would eventually take a break. Also, these little fishmen were only active by the lake's shores. They hardly ever entered the water because once they entered it, their movement speed would sharply reduce by 60%. Shi Feng could use this short rest period to rush into the lake, and once he was in it, the little fishmen would not be able to chase after him. As for the water elementals under the water, Shi Feng could use the doppelganger of Phantom Kill to lure them away. Then he could swim to the cavern below the little fishman's nest. If Shi Feng did not operate through his plan properly, he would definitely die. If he died, his losses would not be minor. It was not the experience loss that was a problem, however. With his advantage as a reincarnated person, Shi Feng could quickly recuperate the experience he lost. Only he would be sent back to the town after dying once, and the time he would waste by returning here was just too much. 10 more seconds. Shi Feng watched the patrolling little fishmen, his heart estimating the time for him to sprint out. Time passed second after second. A group of patrolling fishmen watched their surroundings. After discovering nothing out of the ordinary, they entered a small wooden hut by the lake to rest, emptying the land by the lake. With all his might, Shi Feng dashed towards the shore. When Shi Feng was about 30 yards away from the lake, another group of patrolling fishmen discovered Shi Feng. They immediately sounded out an alarm, their hands wielding short swords as they rushed toward Shi Feng. When faced with 4 level 10 little fishmen as powerful as Shi Feng was, he was not their match. Shi Feng's only hope was to jump into the water. However, the little fishmen were very quick, taking only a short moment to catch up to Shi Feng. They waved their short swords, slashing them at Shi Feng's back. Shi Feng knew he could not outrun the fishmen. He turned around and used Abyssal Bind on one of them, then continued by using parry to block another one of his attackers. As a result, Shi Feng stopped the other little fishmen from moving forward. Using the power behind the fishman's attack, Shi Feng managed to pull away a distance of over 3 yards. He activated gravity liberation and then jumped onto the lake. However, the other little fishmen were quick to catch up, jumping into the lake after Shi Feng as well. Plop. 4 little fishmen fell into the water. Shi Feng, however, was madly running above the lake's surface. Walking on water was a skill that could only be activated after agility reached 80 points. However, Shi Feng had the ring of gravity. As a result, his body had reached a state of near weightlessness after activating gravity liberation. Including his agility that was over 30 points, he too could move on the water's surface. His speed would not be reduced by the water. In a few moments, Shi Feng had shaken off the unyielding little fishmen. He ran to a location not far from the little fishman's nest, diving into the water. Just after entering the water, Shi Feng discovered a cavern that was surrounded by a lot of water elementals. The water elementals were encircling around the cavern as if they were protecting something. Water Elemental, Common Monster. Level 10. HP 750/750. Shi Feng used Phantom Kill. His doppelganger swam over, luring the water elementals. Just as Shi Feng planned, a group of water elementals had discovered the doppelganger. One after another, they chased after the doppelganger. Meanwhile, the doppelganger swam upwards. Although the water elementals had high movement speed underwater, it was an entirely different story when they were above ground. They were the opposite of the little fishmen, becoming extremely slow once they reached the shore. With the water elementals lured away by his doppelganger, Shi Feng took the chance to quickly swim towards the cavern. Before Shi Feng even reached the cavern, the system notified him of the death of his doppelganger. The doppelganger had only earned Shi Feng over 20 seconds. After killing the doppelganger, the water elementals discovered an intruder near the cavern. They all hurriedly swam back to the cavern entrance. After discovering Shi Feng, the speed of these water elementals increased by a fold as they sped toward Shi Feng. Chapter 40, Sun Temple. Above the scarlet-colored lake, the speeding water elementals created waves of water that struck at the little fishman's nest. Waves that were as tall as a person enveloped the entire nest, destroying many of the small wooden huts on it. The hundreds of little fishmen inside the nest entered a frenzy. They screamed and bellowed, each of them holding weapons as they jumped into the water and swam towards the cavern below the nest. Dual-layered protection? Shi Feng took a look behind him, shocked. As if hundreds of water elementals were not enough, now there were also hundreds of little fishmen following behind. With this amount, even 2 or 3 elite groups of players would not amount to anything. Shi Feng had no choice but to increase his speed and rush into the cave. There was still a thread of hope for survival. However, Shi Feng's speed underwater was very slow. It was incomparable to the druids who had their seal transformation, where their movement speed was increased by 50% when moving underwater. Instead, Shi Feng's movement speed was reduced by 50%. Soon, Shi Feng was just 50 yards away from the cavern's entrance. However, the enraged water elementals approached Shi Feng as if they were flying, their distance between Shi Feng shortening quickly. 42 yards. 28 yards. 20 yards. 10 yards. Just when Shi Feng was only 5 yards away from the cavern entrance, the water elementals had caught up with Shi Feng. They waved their gigantic icy fists toward Shi Feng's head. The attacks from water elementals carried a freezing effect that reduced movement speed. As long as they hit Shi Feng, the water elementals would cling to him till death. Shi Feng hurriedly spun around and used parry, blocking the fist of the first water elemental. Using the water elemental's immense strength, Shi Feng's body retreated backward by quite a distance. However, the remaining water elementals also rushed at him. It seems I'll be going back to town. Shi Feng looked at the hundreds of water elementals in front of him, feeling powerless. Just when Shi Feng was about to give up, he had floated into the cavern. Inside he saw a human-shaped ghost roaming about. It was roughly 30 yards away from Shi Feng. Shi Feng gave caution to the wind. If he had to die, then he would die trying. At the very least, he could obtain a little more information for future preparations. Hence, Shi Feng used Wind Blade, his speed increasing by a large leap. Like a gale, Shi Feng swept through the water and rushed to the shore of the cavern, escaping the clutches of the water elementals just in the nick of time. The moment the water elementals left the water, their speed was sharply reduced. They could not catch up to Shi Feng's mad dash at all. After leaving the water, Shi Feng quickly rushed towards the human-shaped ghost. The moment the abyssal blade was about to slash across the ghost's neck, Shi Feng suddenly discovered the half-transparent ghost did not actively attack him. Shi Feng abruptly turned the tip of his sword away, the blade sliding past the ghost's side. It did not attract the ghost's hatred. Close one, Shi Feng felt cold sweat down his back when he looked at the ghost's information. Brave 1 Floyd. High Lord. Level 25. HP 360, 000/360, 000. If Shi Feng had attacked this brave one and attracted his hatred, even if he had 100 lives he would still end up dead. Within God's domain, brave ones were only second to heroes regarding strength. Their position within a kingdom was even higher than that of a marquis and was second only to a duke. Even if such a great character had died and turned into a ghost, he was still a monster of the great lord rank. He was a tyrant amongst monsters. Without 100-men group of elite players, it was impossible to kill off this ghost. Could he be the guardian of this place? Shi Feng looked at the brave one, Floyd, silently guessing in his heart. There were usually guards posted around places with treasure. As for the little fishmen and water elementals outside, they could be considered at most as guard dogs. They were unfit to guard an important treasure. Shi Feng did not dare to stay any longer. After all, there was still a large group of monsters chasing after him. He hurriedly ran towards the inner regions of the cavern. The cavern was very large. There was a flight of stairs that led straight into the depths of the cavern, and following it down ought to lead Shi Feng to the Philosopher's Stone. When Shi Feng was right before the stairs, a sea of water elementals and little fishmen had rushed at him. It was as if they had an undying grudge against him. You lower life forms dare to sully this divine place? Prepare to receive divine punishment. Floyd's gaze suddenly erupted in rage, pulling out a dark golden greatsword from his back. The sword gave out a surge of evil that made it seem as if it were the master of the world. When Floyd raised the greatsword, the surrounding air started becoming heavy. Following which, Floyd gave out a loud bellow as his arms swung the greatsword with all their might. A strong wind, followed by a sword flash, swept through all the water elementals and little fishmen. Each and every one of the monsters turned into ash, and the cavern's entrance instantly transformed into a pile of rubble. Strong! Shi Feng exclaimed in shock. He had sorely underestimated the strength of a brave one. Floyd's single sword could easily wipe out a 100-men group of level 30 elite players. A 300-men group might be needed to even have a fighting chance. It was unexpected that the water elementals and little fishmen did not even have the right to become guard dogs. They were all annihilated in an instant. Shi Feng wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Luckily he was a human and not a lower life form. Otherwise, his outcome would be similar to those water elementals and little fishmen. This place is truly vicious. I guess I can only go downward now. Shi Feng looked at the collapsed entrance. Not even an earthworm could find a way through the debris. The stairs that led down were spiral-shaped. The rocky walls surrounding it were also enchanted with a kind of light-based magic, brightening the entire stairwell. However, this stairwell was extremely long. Fortunately, there were no dangers here. After walking for an entire half an hour, Shi Feng finally arrived at the end of the stairwell, at the beginning of a wide and spacious hall. The hall was about the size of an entire football field, and it looked similar to a shrine of sorts. Made out of gold and jade, the two sides of the hall were carved with an abundance of illustrations and texts. There was also an altar at the deepest part of the shrine. Above the altar was a treasure chest made of pure gold. On each side of the treasure chest, there were two statues made of gold, both of them holding a greatsword in their hands. System: player has discovered the Sun Temple. Sun Temple? It was the first time Shi Feng had heard this name. In his previous life, there was no information on the Sun Temple. It might have been because no player had activated it before, so there was no information about it on the official website. However, looking at the situation, it should be very dangerous. However, Shi Feng couldn't care less about it as he walked towards the golden altar. His target was the Philosopher's Stone, and the golden chest before his eyes should be holding the item. The moment Shi Feng stepped onto the altar, he clearly felt a chill permeating his body. The chilliness came from the two gigantic golden statues. Shi Feng did not know what sort of consequences there would be if he continued onwards to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone. However, he no longer had any choice. The cavern's entrance had already been sealed off, so he could only decide after grabbing the Philosopher's Stone. Shi Feng slowly opened the golden treasure chest. Golden rays of light leaked out from the chest, illuminating the entire temple. Subsequently, the golden rays started to fade, revealing 3 items inside the chest. Shi Feng pocketed the items with zero hesitation. Crap, how could the Philosopher's Stone end up in such a state? Shi Feng looked at the thumb-sized blood-red stone, feeling extremely disappointed. Philosopher's Stone, damaged. Epic rank special item, dropped after death. A sacred item for alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone can be used to turn stone into gold, revive the dead, and has many more unfathomable uses. However, the Philosopher's Stone was damaged and broken into 5 pieces by the Sword Emperor Knight. Nevertheless, the Philosopher's Stone possesses immense strength. As long as the 5 pieces are gathered, it will be able to recover all of its strength. Active effect. Due to being damaged, the Philosopher's Stone possesses less than 1/10 of its original strength. It is only possible to use it for alchemy conversion and elemental refinement. Although the effects were greatly reduced, Shi Feng was still satisfied with it. These 2 abilities would enable Shi Feng to accomplish a lot. As for the remaining 2 items, one of them was the Golden Greatsword, a level 10 fine gold weapon. The other item was an instantaneous movement magic scroll. A great treasure indeed. Shi Feng looked at the Golden Greatsword in his hands with extreme excitement. Aside from magic weapons, it was the best item a level 10 player could have. If a level 10 player were to equip this greatsword, they could definitely become invincible amongst players of the same level. At this moment the 2 statues by the side shook. Their eyes released a red glow, locking their sights on Shi Feng. Shi Feng used the instantaneous movement magic scroll without hesitation. Golden-colored magical seals suddenly wrapped around Shi Feng. The spell on the magic scroll had a cast time of 3 seconds, and it was capable of sending the player to a selected location. This magic scroll was extremely precious. Although there were only a few copies of it in the entire God's domain, dying in this place was a much greater loss to Shi Feng. Just as Shi Feng was about to be slashed by the golden statues, he vanished from the temple. Chapter 41, Commotion in Town. Red Leaf Town, Fountain Plaza. The entire plaza was dyed crimson by the setting sun. There were quite a lot of lifestyle players setting up food stalls and selling snacks that were unique to God's domain. These snacks tasted delicious and they were much better than the delicacies in real life. Also, their selling price was just 2 or 3 coppers. It was truly a bargain. Many players would come here to rest and taste the delicacies of God's domain after a day's worth of hard-fought battles. After all, they could only earn tens of coppers in a single day, and after deducting the expended costs, they would only be left with slightly over 10 coppers. So, giving them a treat should not be a problem. There were quite a few couples sitting on the stone benches, chatting. They ate the food they bought as they enjoyed a lovely time. Suddenly, every player in Red Leaf Town received a system announcement. System: a player has triggered a special storyline. Insurrection of the Little Fishmen has been activated. An expedition quest has been activated in Red Leaf Town. Players can now receive the expedition quest from the Adventurers Guild. Completing the expedition quest will reward players with bountiful rewards and guild reputation. All the players were shocked. In Red Leaf Town, a place where quests were extremely rare, there was actually an expedition quest. Moreover, the rewards were great. It was truly unimaginable. Who was the awesome person that actually triggered a special storyline? The player who achieved this feat attracted the attention of every player in Red Leaf Town. Everyone wondered what great rewards this player gained for activating the storyline. After all, activating a storyline was definitely a rare occurrence. So how could the rewards be few? Quite a lot of players started having their own wicked thoughts. They wanted to kill off the player who activated the storyline quest. Unfortunately, the system announcement did not reveal the player's name. Compared to the average players, the various large guilds were in a state of turmoil. At this stage of the game, aside from clearing dungeons, there was not a single quest that was capable of increasing guild reputation. A guild required guild reputation to level up. As long as their guild could reach level 2 a step earlier, they would be able to obtain the corresponding guild benefits, creating a large advantage over the other guilds. Currently, the other towns surrounding Scarlet River also received the same system announcement. It wasn't just Red Leaf Town. All of the large guilds began strategizing a plan for their crusade against the Little Fishmen. Meanwhile, Shi Feng, who was the cause of all this commotion, currently sat inside the auction house. The auction house was a very convenient place. The items placed on auction by players were not just limited to Red Leaf Town. They could be seen and bought in the hundreds of towns and small cities under the influence of White River City. However, the auction house was very cunning. They charged a 5% handling fee for all items auctioned, so the items there are usually very expensive. However, the auction house was unquestionably the best place for players to sell certain items anonymously. Also, it had been quite some time since God's domain started. The players had already amassed quite an amount of coins, and the large guilds should have already piled up a lot of funding. If Shi Feng were to set up a stall in Red Leaf Town, not only would he attract attention, he might also be targeted by people like Flaming Tiger. More importantly, the reason Shi Feng chose the auction house was that there were too few players in Red Leaf Town who could afford the items he planned to sell. However, it was a different story if there were hundreds of towns competing for them. Hence, Shi Feng placed a mysterious iron plate armor on the auction house, setting its base price at 25 silver coins. Then he placed 5 pieces of bronze equipment with the base price of the plate armor at 3 silver coins, and the others at 2 silver coins. As for the level 10 fine gold greatsword, the result of placing it on auction would be too terrifying to imagine. This weapon was worth at least 2 gold coins, which was the equivalent of 200 silver coins. Currently, even 1 silver coin was extremely precious, so who would be able to even afford the weapon? Following which, Shi Feng searched his bag via the half-transparent screen. Initially, players were gifted with a bag that had 100 slots. However, it was far from enough for Shi Feng. Every player could equip a maximum of 7 bags. So, Shi Feng immediately bought 6 of the largest bags currently available. Each of the bags had 25 slots, and each sold for 40 copper coins. 6 bags meant 240 copper coins. Such an amount was definitely unaffordable to normal players, but it was just a small sum to Shifeng. Shifeng's storage space increased by a lot after equipping the 6 bags. Afterward, Shifeng left the auction house and set up a stall not far from it. He was not the least bit interested with the storyline quest he triggered. He would not fight over the rewards with the others. He already had his fill, so it was only proper for the others to have the leftovers. Buying magic essences and stones in bulk. A stack 2 of magic essences for 6 coppers, a stack of stones for 10 coppers. Shifeng loudly shouted. At this stage of the game, magic essences were some of the materials needed to practice enchanting, whereas stones were one of the building materials engineers needed. However, many level 0 to level 3 monsters would drop these materials when killed, so they were barely worth anything. The materials the many guilds obtained were also sufficient to supply their own lifestyle players, so they would never buy any of them. As for normal players, they would only occasionally buy these materials. However, there was still an ocean of players that did not know how to deal with these materials. They would usually sell these materials to NPCs at a low price. A stack of 20 bottles of magic essence sold for 5 coppers, and a stack of 100 stones sold for 9 coppers. Shifeng bought them at a price of 1 copper coin higher, so there were quite a lot of players who were willing to sell their materials to him. An extra copper per stack would still be quite a significant income. Magic essence was one of the required materials to make the garrison armor. Besides that, large amounts of copper ore and bronze ore were also needed. These ores were scarcely available and all the large guilds bought them in bulk. Unfortunately, it was very difficult to get a hold of them. Shifeng also originally planned to grind for ore. However, now that he had the Philosopher's Stone, ore was no longer a problem. The Philosopher's Stone could carry out elemental refinement. That meant it could refine stone. There was a great chance to obtain or even rare ore. There was absolutely no need for Shifeng to personally grind for them. He could just buy them at an extremely low price. Because of this, tens of thousands of players had effectively become Shifeng's laborers. Very quickly, a large crowd of players had gathered in front of Shifeng. Big brother, I have 6 stacks of magic essence here. Will you take them? I have 3 stacks of stone, do you want them? Many players started asking Shifeng, worried that his bag would fill. After all, they just had too many magic essences and stones. There were no players who were willing to buy these materials. However, it was also a shame to just sell them to the NPCs, so the materials just stayed inside their bags. I'll take all of them. Just trade them over, Shifeng said. Before this, Shifeng amassed quite a bit of wealth. Including his transaction with Gentle Snow, he was in possession of quite a lot of coins. Shifeng could definitely buy large amounts of magic essences and stones. A player was selling 3 stacks of magic essences here. A player was selling 5 stacks of stones there. Within moments, Shifeng had acquired 60 stacks of magic essences and 85 stacks of stones. The money that remained in his pockets was less than 10 coppers now. Sorry, but I'm full, Shifeng packed up his stall after explaining. Suddenly, the many remaining players who came to sell off their magic essences and stones had faces filled with disappointment. Big brother, will you still buy them in the future? A player asked. I will. However, it will still be a period before I do buy them. You all can save them up for now. Shifeng resolutely said. The amount of magic essences and stones Shifeng just purchased was far from enough for him to become an advanced forging apprentice 3. After leaving the business street, Shifeng arrived at the Forging Association. He paid 5 coppers to rent a basic forging room for 1 hour. Inside the basic forging room, all the equipment needed for forging was provided. Players did not need to buy their own equipment. The intermediate ranked forging room was a lot better. It could increase the success rate of forging by 3%. However, it costs 1 silver per hour to use that room. As for advanced forging rooms, those were not available in small towns. They were only available in cities. However, their prices were extremely staggering. Chapter 42, Elemental Refinement. Forging Association inside a forging room. Shifeng took out a stack of stone, placing it on the table. A stack of stone had 100 pieces in total. They immediately filled up the round table. Some even fell to the ground. Time to see how good you actually are. Shifeng smiled as he retrieved the crimson-red Philosopher's Stone. If the Philosopher's Stone were seen by someone else, the consequences Shifeng would face would be immense. Hence, Shifeng rented a forging room. Without his permission, nobody could enter the room. Shi Feng took a piece of stone from the table and used the Philosopher's Stone on it. System: do you wish to use the Philosopher's Stone for elemental refinement? Shi Feng immediately chose yes. Following which, the Philosopher's Stone started emitting a faint red glow. A mysterious power flowed into the stone. The stone the size of a fist suddenly turned into yellow sand, scattering to the ground. The result was a failure. However, Shi Feng revealed a calm smile at the result. It did not perturb him in the slightest. Afterward he picked up another stone and tried again. It was very precious. A normal copper ore sold for 2 coppers. They were only worth 1 copper coin if sold to an NPC. A stack of 100 copper ore could be sold for 200 copper coins to guilds, and they would still fight over them. Compared to a stack of stone which only sold for 10 copper coins, copper ore was just too expensive. Elemental refinement extracted the metal element out of the stone. However, some stones did not possess any metal element. So, it was only natural that they turned to sand. Such failures were just too common. There was still no ore after 10 consecutive tries. Shi Feng started becoming depressed. The success rate was just too low. Shi Feng even started to suspect that these stones were picked from a desert to result in all the yellow sand. Relax, relax. There are still many stones left. Shi Feng sucked in a deep breath, reassuring himself. He picked up another piece of stone, trying elemental refinement once more. This time, the stone still scattered into a pile of sand. However, in the middle of the yellow grains, there was a piece of metal that had a purplish-red luster. It was copper ore again. With the first piece of copper ore in his hands, Shi Feng let out a relaxed breath. His hands started moving at a faster pace. All the stones above the stone table turned into yellow sand within moments. The stack of stones had yielded a total of 23 pieces of copper ore and 2 pieces of bronze ore. Compared to copper ore, the price of bronze ore was 3 times that of copper ore. They were worth 3 copper coins when sold to NPCs. Due to the rarity of bronze ore, players would buy them at 7 copper coins apiece. Seeing the ores on the table, Shi Feng felt the Philosopher's Stone was truly a gold mine. Even if the Philosopher's Stone was currently damaged, it was still out of the ordinary. It was no wonder why many kingdoms were willing to muster up their armies and fight for the Philosopher's Stone. Having the Philosopher's Stone in hand was the equivalent of having a wealthy treasury. At that time, a kingdom would find it hard not to become prosperous. Shi Feng kept the ores on the table and brought out another stack of stones. Stack after stack of stones disappeared, whereas the amount of yellow sand had piled up into a small hill. Fortunately, the forging room could be cleaned of rubbish with just a click of a button. After pushing the clean button, the small hill of yellow sand vanished from sight. After spending an hour's time, Shi Feng had refined 40 stacks of stones. He had obtained a little over 7 stacks of copper ore and a little over 1 stack of bronze ore again. They would be worth over 20 silver coins if Shi Feng sold them. Meanwhile, the cost of obtaining these ores were only 4 silver coins. The difference was 5 times the price. It was an absolute profit. Most importantly, ores dropped in very small numbers, so it was impossible to buy them in bulk. Shi Feng received a system notification the moment he had left the forging room. System: the violent bear armor you placed at the auction house has been sold. After deducting the procedural fees, 31 silvers 53 coppers have been placed in your bag. System: the dark star boots you placed at the auction house has been sold. After deducting the procedural fees, 3 silvers 21 coppers have been placed in your bag. A series of notifications from the auction house had caused Shi Feng's lips into a smile. As expected, the greater the competition, the higher the price would go. Shi Feng was very satisfied with the amount the items sold for. He never imagined that a mysterious iron plate armor for shield warriors could actually be sold for over 30 silver coins. It seems there were a lot of wealthy people within the area of influence of White River City. After selling the equipment, Shi Feng had suddenly become a wealthy tycoon. With over 50 silver coins in his pockets, even his confidence was different now. Currently, players would still be happy over having 20 to 30 copper coins on their person. Shi Feng already possessed more than 50 silver coins. Including the silver coins Gentle Snow owed him, if Shi Feng were to sell off the copper ore he had immediately, he would instantly become wealthy with gold. However, he would not sell the ores. These ores were the foundation for Shi Feng to earn big money. Following which, Shi Feng rented the forging room for another hour. He turned the remaining stones into ores. His luck was better this time around. From 45 stacks of stones, he obtained 10 stacks of copper ore and 2 stacks of bronze ore again. With this, Shifeng had a total of 17 stacks of copper ore and 3 stacks of bronze ore again. It would be quite some time before Shifeng could use them all up. With money in hand now, Shifeng once more arrived at the central area of the Forging Association, at the administration area. Currently, there were quite a few forger players that were groomed by guilds renting forging rooms. This is just evil. It actually costs 5 coppers for an hour. My guild just gave me 30 coppers. That's not enough at all. That's considered good already. At least the equipment is all there. Look at the forging equipment. Even the most common required a few silvers. An entire set would cost over 30 silver coins. It's just a blatant rip-off. You still haven't seen the intermediate forging room. It costs 1 silver an hour, but the room only increases your success rate by 3%. Even a first-rate guild would not be able to handle such a price. A few forgers continuously complained. They bitterly detested the prices set by the Forging Association. However, there was also a hint of bragging carried in their voices. After all, they had the support of their guilds, whereas normal players wouldn't even be able to rent a forging room, not to mention increasing their forging levels. Shifeng circled these players, walking towards the manager of the association, saying, "I want to rent an intermediate forging room. May I know how long you wish to rent it for?" The ashen youth who was the association's manager excitedly asked. Currently, a majority of the adventurers were poor blokes. Every one of them only rented the basic forging rooms, and even then they rented with unwillingness. So, a great change occurred to the manager's servicing attitude when he was able to see a rich adventurer like Shifeng. Looking at the time, it was currently morning in the real world. When using the virtual gaming helmet, a person could not stay within God's domain for too long. 2 hours then. Shifeng said after some thought. "Alright, here is your key. That will be a total of 2 silver coins." The manager handed the key over to Shifeng, smiling. Shifeng took out 2 shiny silver coins, placing them on the table and turning around to leave. The players who had previously been discussing the deviousness of the Forging Association were all dumbstruck. They even thought they were hallucinating. However, they were indeed silver coins on the table, and not the scarlet yellow copper coins. "Crap, a tycoon," a male elementalist said in envy. "Brother Tycoon, little sister knows how to warm beds." Another pretty and flirtatious female player winked at Shifeng, flattering him. "Isn't it just some dirty money? I will definitely become an intermediate forging apprentice a step ahead of him," a male priest said in a sour tone, even though he knew it to be impossible. The facilities of the intermediate forging room were much better than the basic one. On the surface, the room itself only increased the success rate of forging by 3%. However, including the facilities that came with the room, the success rate was increased by at least 5%. To a forger, a difference of 5% success rate was like the difference between heaven and earth. Chapter 43, Book of Forging. Shifeng took the key to the intermediate forging room and went up the second floor, ignoring the flirting young lady. The first floor of the Forging Association only had basic forging rooms, whereas intermediate forging rooms were located on the second floor. When compared to the first floor, there were far fewer people on the second floor. There were only NPCs walking around. Players would not come to this place at all. Also, there were only 20 intermediate forging rooms, unlike the basic rooms, which numbered at 50. Shifeng entered the intermediate forging room. The room was much larger and refined. The facilities available were also better than the basic room, especially the hammer and flame. These 2 items were not simple at all. Shifeng held up the silvery white hammer that was placed on the iron-woven felt. 100 refinement hammer, bronze rank. Forging items. When forging, the success rate is increased by 3%. Requirements, strength 4. Just this 100 refinement hammer alone was hard to obtain by players. The best hammers NPCs sold were common hammers. Those hammers did not increase the success rate of forging. As for stealing this 100 refinement hammer, it was an impossible task. Items that belonged to the forging room could not be taken away by players. The flame here was extraordinary as well. Instead of the usual scarlet, yellow color, the flame here burned with a scarlet, green color. It was not a common flame, but a mysterious flame. Shifeng took a look at its description. Scarlet Devil Flame, Tier 1 Mysterious Flame. Special item. possesses extremely high temperatures. Items smelted with the flame will have higher purity. When refining potions or forging items, there will be a definite increase in success rates. Mysterious flames were rare and powerful flames. These flames had varying strength, and they could be categorized into 9 tiers. The first tier was the weakest, whereas the 9th tier was the strongest. However, even a first-tier mysterious flame was not something that could be easily obtained by players. Due to the mysterious flame's rarity, its price within God's domain was extremely high. Including the fact that both potion making and forging required mysterious flames, the prices of mysterious flames had become even more shocking. There was once a Tier 4 flame that caused tens of first-rate guilds to fight over it. After the death of millions of players, the flame finally ended up in the hands of the world dominators. Not long after, a master potion maker and world dominators rose to become a grandmaster potion maker, increasing the influence of the world dominators by a large leap. Shi Feng had a great yearning within him when he looked at the burning mysterious flame. It was the thirst of a forger. Just when Shi Feng was in deep thought, he suddenly recalled a matter. On the 2nd month of God's domain's operation, the third-rate guild, Glorious Light, had discovered a Tier 2 mysterious flame, Ice Blue Devil Flame. The flame was found in the 100 Ghosts Forest, and its discovery induced great envy into the other guilds. At that time, there were a lot of lifestyle players who had applied to join Glorious Light, allowing the guild's power to abruptly increase and becoming the tyrant of a small city. However, there were also many guilds who gathered information in secret, wanting to obtain a mysterious flame for themselves. Naturally, Shadow was no exception to this. Shadow had discovered the location and method of obtainment of the mysterious flame from Glorious Light's inner circle. Unfortunately, such mysterious flames only appeared once, never appearing again after they were gone. This discovery caused many guilds to waste their efforts. As he was thinking about the Ice Blue Devil Flame, Shi Feng suddenly started having intentions towards this mysterious flame. If he could make it his own, it would definitely be of great help to him in the future when he started his own guild. Moreover, the flame would be of great help in pushing Shi Feng to become a true forger. However, Shi Feng still needed to hash out a proper plan to obtain the Ice Blue Devil Flame. He needed to prepare many things before he could obtain the flame. Following which, Shi Feng took out the garrison armor's forging design. Without wasting time, he immediately chose to learn it. System: you have learned how to forge the garrison armor. Afterward, Shi Feng placed all the needed materials onto the stone table. Then he took out the immensely precious book of forging and started to forge. Shi Feng was a basic forging apprentice. His success rate for forging a level 0 common equipment did not exceed 20%, and after a successful forging, there was a 40% chance for him to obtain 1 proficiency point. If Shi Feng were to forge the garrison armor, a level 3 bronze equipment, his chance of success would not exceed 5%. Successfully forging a piece of bronze equipment would bring an additional bonus, which was a 100% chance to obtain 2 proficiency points. However, 1,000 proficiency points were needed to become an intermediate forging apprentice. Obtaining such a large amount of points required equally large funding to support it. There was no way for a lifestyle player to support such a large sum of money by themselves. The forgers and guilds all started out by forging common equipment. There was not a single guild who would allow these lifestyle players to forge bronze equipment right off the bat. To begin with, they didn't even possess a forging design for bronze equipment, and even if they did, they wouldn't carry out such an action. The success rate of a basic forging apprentice was just too low, and the materials needed were just too expensive. A single failure would cost 1 silver coin or more. It was a loss that not even guilds could handle. Moreover, they couldn't even collect that many materials to make the equipment. However, Shi Feng did not have such worries. He had the Philosopher's Stone, so he did not lack in resources. Furthermore, the materials needed to make the garrison armor were cheaply priced. It only required 5 bottles of magic essences, 5 pieces of bronze ore and 20 pieces of copper oregon. The cost of making the garrison armor was only 80 copper coins. When compared to the cost of making other bronze equipment, it was at least 20 coppers cheaper. The garrison armor also had very good attributes, so it was extremely welcomed. Shi Feng wouldn't have to be troubled over figuring out how to sell it. The most important thing was the Book of Forging. The Book of Forging could increase the success rate of forging common equipment by 70%, bronze equipment by 50%, mysterious iron equipment by 30%, secret silver equipment by 20%, fine gold equipment by 10%, dark gold equipment by 5%, and epic equipment by 1%. With such attributes, the Book of Forging could allow a player to become a master forger easily and unimpeded. Basic forging apprentices originally had a 20% success rate at forging common equipment. Including the 70% from the book, the success rate would become 90%. Further including the facilities of the intermediate forging room and removing the possibilities of mistakes, the success rate of making common equipment was 99% or higher. Unless the player was a pig too, failure was impossible. The Book of Forging's frightening abilities could clearly be seen from this. As for the garrison armor, Shifeng had a 5% success rate for making it. Including the 50% from the book, the 3% from the room's facilities, and also the effects of the mysterious flame, Shifeng now had a 60% success rate for making the garrison armor. Not to mention bronze equipment, even if common equipment had a 60% success rate, it would still drive forger players mad. Such a high percentage for success was something unimaginable to forgers. Following which, Shifeng started slowly making the garrison armor according to the forging design's requirements. He first smelted the copper and bronze ore in the fire. After being in the fire for 5 minutes, the ores started to melt and form a lump. Afterward, Shifeng added in the magic essence, letting it burn for another minute before removing the red-hot ore and placing it onto the metal felt. The ore's scorching hot temperature caused Shifeng to sweat. However, Shifeng did not dare be careless, as the following process was the most important part. After finishing the preparations, Shifeng held the 100 refinement hammer and readied it to hammer the fiery ore. Bang, bang, bang. Sparks flew in all directions. The hammering sounds echoed throughout the wide forging room. Shifeng struck every hit with careful precision. In his previous life, Shifeng did not learn forging. He only learned the gathering skill. However, he still knew quite a lot about forging. After all, he had conversed with a master forger quite often, so he was knowledgeable to the degree of not making certain low-leveled mistakes. After hammering the ore over 100 times, Shifeng felt that it was perfect. Shifeng wiped away the sweat on his forehead, carefully selecting the crimson ore's interface and clicking the complete button. Following which, the red-hot ore started transforming. Within 5 seconds, it had transformed into a silvery gray-colored armor. On the surface there seemed to be nothing wrong with it. However, equipment's successful forging did not just depend on its appearances, there was also its quality. Quality included the equipment's attributes and rank. Bronze equipment that was badly forged would have their ranks decreased to common, or their base attributes would not be up to standards. Hence, Shifeng selected the information of the armor, checking whether it was a success or a failure. Chapter 44, Change. Although Shifeng could handle failure, there was nobody who was willing to squander their money for no good reason. So, Shifeng was more or less slightly nervous. After Shifeng selected the option to check the armor's information, 3 words appeared on the panel: Identification in progress. The red loading bar slowly increased. The system was currently determining the statistics of the equipment. After 3 seconds had passed, the system finished identifying the armor and revealed the armor's information. Garrison armor, bronze rank plate armor. Level 3. Equipment requirement, strength 10. Defense plus 22. Strength plus 2, endurance plus 2. HP plus 150. Durability 35/35. Additional ability. Defensive power, reduces damage taken by 3%. Restricted to shield warriors and guardian knights. System, garrison armor has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 2 points. Obtained 800 EXP. Great. It even has an additional ability, defensive power. Shifeng was extremely happy when he saw the additional ability on the garrison armor. He never imagined his first try at forging a piece of bronze equipment would be a success. He even obtained so much EXP. It was no wonder why the master forgers in his previous life never went out to grind, but their levels were not a bit low. Not only had the garrison armor forged met the standard attribute values, but it also possessed an additional ability. Originally, the garrison armor did not possess defensive power. However, when the forger exhibited extraordinary skill, coupled with the presence of the mysterious flame, there was a chance for an additional ability to appear on the equipment. In such occurrences, the price of the equipment would be increased to another level. Shifeng took his time sizing up the garrison armor, feeling the texture of the silvery gray metal and admiring its eye-catching design. The average piece of bronze equipment was absolutely no match for it. Shifeng was very satisfied with his creation. Currently, common equipment was still the mainstream equipment for players. Even if players were to reach level 6 in the future, it would not be a surprise to find them wearing only common equipment. After all, it was too hard to obtain bronze equipment. As for the elite parties, just having 1 to 2 pieces of bronze equipment was considered being blessed. The garrison armor could be used by both shield warriors and guardian knights. If Shifeng were to sell the armor, the elite parties would definitely welcome it. After all, the quality of an MT's equipment could ease the difficulty of conquering a dungeon a lot. Even if Shifeng were to set the price at 4 silver coins, these parties would still buy the armor regardless the cost. As for the defensive power of the garrison armor, its benefits towards a party's MT went without saying. Shifeng would not accept anything lower than 5 silver coins for this armor. With his first experience at successful forging, Shifeng continued forging garrison armors. However, Shifeng took out the 100 refinement steel this time. He wanted to know what effects the steel would have when it was used to forge equipment. Within 10 minutes, the second garrison armor took form. However, the color on this garrison armor was different than the previous one. Instead of having a silvery gray color, it was pitch black now. After going through 3 seconds of identification, the system displayed the statistics to Shifeng. Garrison heavy armor, bronze rank plate armor. Level 3. Equipment requirement, strength 14. Defense plus 25. Strength plus 2, endurance plus 4. HP plus 150. Durability 40/40. Additional ability. Defensive power, reduces damage taken by 5%. Restricted to shield warriors and guardian knights. System, garrison heavy armor has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 2 points. Obtained 1000 EXP. System, due to your forging genius, forging proficiency has been increased by an additional 2 points. Currently, Shifeng had completely forgotten about the additional proficiency points that his forging talent gave him. Instead, his eyes were fixated on the garrison heavy armor. The attributes on the armor were already comparable to a piece of level 3 mysterious iron equipment. The price tag on it was at least 10 silver coins. Shifeng never imagined that the 100 refinement steel would create such large changes. Shifeng had no choice but to admit that the item given by a master forger was not ordinary. Unfortunately, Shifeng only had 9 pieces of 100 refinement steel remaining. Naturally, now that Shifeng knew the effects of the 100 refinement steel, he would not simply squander them away. He would set them aside and use them when he had good equipment to forge. 2 hours quickly passed by. Shifeng forged garrison armors without stopping during this time. He had obtained a total of 23 pieces of garrison armor, but he also failed to forge 4 pieces. Shifeng was very satisfied with the result. A single, successfully forged garrison armor could easily remedy the loss of the 4 failures. At the same time, Shifeng himself had also risen to level 3. His current level was not that far from the expert players. Moreover, his forging proficiency had increased to 44 points. Such an increase was at least 4 to 5 times faster than those forgers that belonged to guilds. Following which, Shifeng left the intermediate forging room and arrived in front of the auction house. He immediately auctioned off the 11 pieces of garrison armor that did not possess defensive power, their base prices set at 4 silver coins. As for the garrison armors and garrison heavy armor that possessed defensive power, Shifeng placed them aside for now. He wanted to let these guilds and elite parties have a taste of the armor first. That way the remaining garrison armors could be sold at an even better price. Afterward, Shifeng set up a stall in the trade area, casually yelling out. Following which, many players ran over to Shifeng, selling their stones and magic essences to him. After purchasing the materials for half an hour, Shifeng took a look at the time. It was near nightfall in God's domain. The monsters at night became much more powerful and killing them became much more difficult. This period was not suited for leveling and Shifeng should rest as well. Currently he was still using the virtual gaming helmet, not the virtual gaming pod, to play God's domain. The virtual gaming pod could provide the energy and nutrients required by the player's body at any time. It could also stimulate the body's muscles, preventing the body from weakening due to playing God's domain for long periods. Shifeng's finger tapped and clicked, calling out the system interface and choosing to log off. Currently within the cramped rented apartment, The sunlight had long since seeped through the windows and scattered throughout the room. The temperature within the room was also starting to rise. Shifeng took off the gaming helmet. He lifted up his body and stretched. After more than 10 hours of inactivity and lying on the bed, Shifeng's body was numbed throughout. He needed to move around before he could return to normal. Shifeng started doing push-ups, sit-ups, and other forms of basic training. In this extremely materialistic age, body training had already become indispensable in one's life. After tens of years of constant research, scientists have managed to obtain a huge breakthrough in strengthening the human body and prolonging its lifespan. Mankind could now retain their youth for a longer period. The breakthrough also increased the average lifespan of a person to 100 years old. At the same time, scientists had pointed out the necessity of working out the body. Henceforth, the age of exercise had arrived. In current times, sports tournaments and fighting competitions were the attention of the public eye. Just in the university alone, there were already plenty of sports societies and martial arts societies, and they were very welcomed by the students. In the current society, those who did not possess a trick up their sleeves would be looked down upon. On the other hand, those celebrity athletes and martial arts experts were absolutely revered. In the university, there was never a lack of beautiful women surrounding the distinguished athletes and students who often participated in mixed martial arts competitions. As for pretty boys, their time has long since faded from popularity. In his previous life, Shifeng did not pay much attention to his body. As a result, he nearly caused its destruction. By the time he wanted to train his body, he was no longer young. Even if he had trained with all his might, the effects would not be great. In this life, Shifeng would not be the same as before, naturally. He would not solely pay attention to God's domain, ignoring his body's training. After training for half an hour, Shifeng's entire body was covered with sweat. It looked as if he had just taken a shower. Just when he was about to dine on his cooked instant noodles, his phone started ringing. Shifeng looked at the contacting person. Unexpectedly, it was the usually silent female class monitor, Zhao Ruoshi. "Class monitor, what's up?" Shifeng asked after answering the call. According to Shifeng memories, aside from attending classes, Shifeng never had any contact with the female class monitor. Within the 4 years Shifeng had spent in the university, he had not spoken over 100 sentences with Zhao Ruoshi. "Shifeng, hurry over to school. I failed to notify you of this because you do not live in the male dormitories, but now I'm telling you. At 11 o'clock, there will be an important matter being announced at Teaching Block 3, Classroom 401. Shifeng looked towards the electronic clock on his table. It was already 10:30 right now. He answered, "All right, I'll go there immediately." Chapter 45, The Inferior Student of the Class. Cutting off the call, Shifeng immediately ate his instant noodles and hurried to school. When he was on the road, Shifeng finally recalled this incident. It was one of the reasons that caused his parents to fall gravely ill. In Shifeng's previous life, he and Blackie joined Shadow Workshop. When Zhao Ruoshi called him to go to the school, he chose to continue playing God's domain instead of going. He joined Shadow Workshop after much trouble. If he wanted to rise in position within Shadow, he needed to have a good performance. How could he have the time to care about small matters that happened in the classroom? As a result, his university recommendation became non-existent. Although it was just a recommendation, it could allow students to find better jobs. The stress levels of the current society were extremely powerful, and jobs were not easy to find. Such a recommendation would be a stepping stone towards the higher levels of a company. Shifeng's parents were deeply worried after they found out about this incident. It was also because of such worries that caused the mental stress on his parents to increase substantially. Only Shifeng's parents never revealed it to him. Instead, they encouraged him. They didn't want him to worry about their household debts. As a result, they became both physically and mentally exhausted, falling gravely ill a year later. In this life, Shifeng did not wish to repeat such a disaster, even if the recommendation was absolutely useless to him. However, he also wished to know the reason that caused him to lose the recommendation. Shifeng was considered average regarding results amongst his class. There were absolutely no problems with him obtaining the recommendation. He did not have a share in it. The only reason he could think of for such a situation was the incident that would happen today. After walking into the university, Shifeng discovered a very interesting situation. The school was crowded, There was an abnormal number of students in the university today. Usually, there would not be that many people within the university grounds. The students would usually study in the library or gather outside to have some fun. Worst case scenario, they would just stay in their dormitories and play games. Unlike the current situation, they wouldn't normally come out for a stroll. When Shifeng walked towards teaching block 3, he discovered that the normally empty classrooms were packed with people. All of them were fully occupied. What is happening today? Shifeng was puzzled. The moment Shifeng entered classroom 401, he could feel the air in the room was slightly odd. His classmates all shifted their gaze towards him, their expressions filled with astonishment. Shifeng was like something that should not be there, yet had actually appeared. The male students only glanced at Shifeng. They did not pay him any attention as they continued with their conversations. Meanwhile, some of the gorgeously dressed females in the class sent Shifeng expressions of disgust. However, Shifeng had long since gotten used to such reactions. When he was about to turn around and look at them, the females immediately turned their heads away. Fellow student Shifeng, you're here. Find a place to sit. When fellow student Ling Feilong arrives, everyone in the class will be present. The female monitor, Zhao Ruoshi, had a calm expression on her face when she spoke to Shifeng as if it was all just for formality's sake. However, Shifeng could faintly feel a hint of expectation in Zhao Ruoshi's eyes when she turned around to look at him. However, that expectation was not targeted towards him, but most probably towards the Ling Feilong she spoke of. All right. Shifeng nodded his head, simply choosing a corner to sit down in. As for sitting and starting a conversation with the other male classmates, Shifeng could tell it would be impossible just by looking at their expressions. In regards to such a situation, Shifeng could only let loose a bitter smile. In his previous life, he truly has failed at being a functioning human being. However, there was nothing he could do. To save money, he never participated in any of the student gatherings or class events. He had long since become an invisible existence within the class. In the eyes of his classmates, Shifeng might be a very reclusive person. Why is this person here? The class monitor should be the one who notified him. I never thought he would actually show up. He's just an inferior student in the class. Just looking at him makes me mad. Look at how cunning his eyes are. Don't tell me he took a fancy to this young lady? Disgusting. The students in the class started a quiet discussion about Shifeng. They were very shocked at Shifeng's arrival. Usually, Shifeng would never participate in any events, but now this person himself actually showed up. Their disgust towards Shifeng was clear in their speech. Their tones when speaking also showed how much they looked down on him. The reason for such treatment was because Shifeng was weak. He was also often bullied by students from other classes. Moreover, he was the inferior student who was always too poor to join the class outings. It was just an embarrassment to be in the same class as him. Although their voices were soft, Shifeng could still hear them clearly. It was better to say they let Shifeng hear their conversation. Learning was only secondary in everyone's eyes. The truly important thing to have was a strong body. After all, the current age was one where body training was strongly emphasized upon. However, Shifeng's weak body clearly did not fit the current age. So, naturally he had become an outcast within the class. However, Shifeng simply laughed away at his situation. He was no longer a child, so why would he be angry over the actions of these children? Currently, his heart was only concerned about the matters regarding the recommendation. Not long after, a robust youth entered the classroom. The youth's height was an entire 9 meters. This person was Ling Feilong. According to Shifeng's memories, Ling Feilong was a person with many tricks up his sleeve. After he graduated from university, he managed to woo the princess of a large corporation. 3 years later, he became the corporation's CEO. However, due to the virtual world's influence towards the real world growing ever larger, Ling Feilong invested in God's domain as well. At that time, he looked for Shifeng, his classmate, wanting to collaborate in God's domain. At that time, Shifeng was the captain of Shadow Workshop. He was also the guild leader of the guild, Shadow. Shadow was barely considered a second-rate guild during those times. However, it still had control over a large city with a population of 500,000 people. Considering they were once classmates, Shifeng agreed to Ling Feilong's proposal. Afterward, although Shadow earned quite a lot of money from the collaboration, Ling Feilong earned even more. At the same time, Ling Feilong groomed several powerful subordinates. Then he somehow managed to gain the favor of a first-rate guild, abandoning Shadow. Everyone watched as Ling Failong entered the classroom. The male students all stood up, displaying their respect towards him. On the other hand, the gorgeous female students from before sent meaningful gazes towards Ling Failong. Even Zhao Ruoxi had some changes to her calm expression. Shi Feng had plenty of experience with women in his previous life, so he could tell Zhao Ruoxi was somewhat interested in Ling Failong. What kind of situation was this? Shi Feng could not make heads of the current situation. It would be fine if it were just the other students, but Zhao Ruoxi was the class flower. She had a calm personality, an oval face, a graceful body, and even her family background were good. Normally, male students from other classes could be seen chasing after her. However, none of them ever entered her eyes. So, why did she take a fancy upon Ling Failong? Was Ling Failong fated to become a protagonist in life, a person who was loved and welcomed by all? Everyone sit down. Like a leader, Ling Failong naturally walked up to the lectern. He gratefully said, "Thank you for coming to congratulate me. I would not be here today were it not for all of your support. Brother Failong, you are too humble. More than 5,000 people entered the school's fighting competition, yet you've managed to enter the top 10. You are the pride of our class. You now have the rights to enter Jianghu City's fighting competition without going through the pre-selections. This feat is not achievable by the average person. You mustn't forget about us once you've become a martial arts master in the future." "That's right, Brother Failong. We're looking forward to you becoming the champion." The students in the class gave their congratulations one after the other. Some of the female students even thought of throwing themselves at Ling Failong. However, Shi Feng was an exception. He was truly dumbfounded. Originally, he thought a huge incident occurred, but it was just the school's fighting competition having just ended. They were only here to congratulate Ling Failong for being able to enter the city's fighting competition. If it was before, Shi Feng might have envied Ling Failong. After all, there were just too many people who liked fighting competitions. Those who were able to participate in the city's fighting competition were much more appreciated than some big celebrity. This was due to the difficulty of entering the fighting competition. There was a strict selection system, and it was considered good to have 3 to 4 people selected out of 10,000. If these selected participants performed well, they might even get a contract to become the spokesperson for a large enterprise. With all the celebrity advertisements that would be offered, it wouldn't be difficult to amass wealth. Their futures would have boundless prospects. However, along with the rise in popularity of God's domain, people became even more addicted to fighting battles and wars in the game. After all, being able to personally experience the fight was still the best experience. The lack of danger of fighting in the game only made it even more exciting. As a result, many experts became idols of the players in God's domain. Chapter 46, Meeting an Acquaintance. As everyone was giving their congratulations to Ling Failong, the person himself had his eyes swept over to a corner of the room, the corner where Shi Feng sat. His eyes held a hint of dissatisfaction when he looked at Shi Feng. He was the pride of the class and, even more so, a future celebrity. Yet, an inferior student like Shi Feng actually did not intend to flatter him. After a round of flattery, Ling Failong allowed the students to return to their seats. "I thank everyone for your support. Please quiet down for a moment. I am here today because I have a matter that I wish to discuss," Ling Failong said. Hearing Ling Failong's announcement, everyone listened attentively. Only Shi Feng remained uninterested towards Ling Failong's matter. However, Shi Feng could not help but pay attention after hearing Ling Failong speak. "It's something related to the school's recommendation." Ling Failong calmly said, "Everyone knows how I am obsessed with fighting. However, my grades at school aren't that good, so it has caused some problems with my recommendation. So, I wish for someone here to give up a spot. The school has already agreed to this, so I am here to discuss this matter with everyone else." "Brother Long, this is only a trivial matter. It is only a recommendation. As the pride of the class, as long as Brother Long requests it, there will definitely be someone in the class willing to give up their spot," a bootlicking male student said. Although everyone in the class agreed to this person's words, there was nobody who willingly stood up to give away their recommendation. In the end, finding a job was just too hard. The recommendation was much more valued than a person's educational background when working inside a big company. If they were to give up their recommendation, what would they do in the future? As for the ones who had no rights to the recommendation to begin with, naturally, it was easier to be brave standing from a safe distance. They continuously incited the others like hot-blooded madmen. Ling Feilong's expression slightly darkened when he saw nobody taking initiative. Since everyone is reacting so proactively, it won't be good if I'm the one who does the choosing. How about this, let's raise our hands and vote, Ling Feilong suggested with a smile. That's a good idea. Brother Feilong is the smartest. Then let's start voting. The hot-blooded madmen all stood up one after another, their faces holding expressions of delight at the misfortune of others. Shi Feng, who sat by the wall, was suddenly enlightened after looking at this scene. Crap. So it was these bastards who stole my recommendation. A wrathful flame ignited within Shi Feng's heart. He was truly a fool in his previous life for actually working with Ling Feilong. Not in this life, however. If Ling Feilong wished to cause trouble for him in this life, he couldn't be blamed for reacting in kind. Maybe it was a continuation of his previous life, but the voting results did not change in the slightest. The students immediately sat Shi Feng on the throne. Fellow student Shi Feng, you are really lucky. I'm slightly envious of you. You'll get to have Brother Long cover for you from now on, you should be grateful to us. Everyone in the class started congratulating Shi Feng as if Shi Feng had just won a 5 million credit lottery. Fellow student Shi Feng, thank you truly. After school is over today, I invite you to come with me for a drink at the Maple Leaf Bar. Ling Feilong smiled a hypocritical smile. He did not place Shi Feng within his sights at all. There was not a hint of gratitude in his tone, only disdain. Following which, he turned to look at the other students saying, of course everyone else is also invited. Let us enjoy ourselves today. Hold on a moment, Shi Feng suddenly said. Suddenly, everyone in the class turned their sights towards Shi Feng. If Shi Feng did not actively speak up, they might have long since forgotten about his existence. May I know if fellow student Shi Feng has something he wishes to say? Ling Feilong looked towards Shi Feng, asking with a smile. I will not agree with this. So why are you getting all joyous all on your own? Shi Feng shot a glance at Ling Feilong saying, if any of you wish to give him your recommendation, then just give it to him. In any case, I won't be letting go of my recommendation. If there are no other matters, I'll be leaving. Suddenly the entire classroom became dead silent. Nobody could imagine that Shi Feng, a person constantly bullied by students of other classes, actually rebelled against Ling Feilong. His current display was very abnormal. Was Shi Feng not afraid of being taken out by Ling Feilong? Ling Feilong as well was shocked, not because of Shi Feng's actions however, but at Shi Feng's foolishness. Did he actually think he could protect his recommendation just because he had refused to hand it over? This was a result voted by the entire class. It would be meaningless even if Shi Feng refused. When the time came, the university would still give him the recommendation. Even though the result was unchangeable, Shi Feng still foolishly chose to stand against him. Should Shi Feng be called foolish? Or did he have a few screws loose? Just when Ling Feilong wanted to take action, an impatient voice sounded from outside the door. Little Long, are you still not done? Brother Zhang doesn't like to be kept waiting. A tall blonde youth came in through the door. Following behind him was an alluring girl dressed in sexy and revealing clothing. The two together caused the male students to look on in envy. Shi Feng shot a glance over, discovering that it was actually an acquaintance. The tall and blonde youth was coincidentally Flaming Tiger. His real name was Zhou Yuhu, and he was a fourth-year university student, similar to Shi Feng. This person had great talent, and he managed to obtain a good result of third place in the university's fighting tournament this time around. Meanwhile, the enchanting female by Zhou Yuhu's side was also an acquaintance of Shi Feng's. Her name was Qin Shuyu and she was Shi Feng's classmate during high school. She was also the flower of the class at the time. Shi Feng was truly blind during those times. Young and dumb, he was actually enchanted by Qin Shuyu, even to the point of confessing his love to her. Naturally, the result was rejection. After entering university, Qin Shuyu had become Zhou Yuhu's girlfriend. Qin Shuyu even mentioned to Zhou Yuhu the matter of Shi Feng's confession. As a result, Shi Feng was often taken care of by students from other classes. After Shi Feng joined Shadow, he was often sent to carry out senseless tasks, stunting his growth in God's domain. Brother Hu, why have you come here? I'll immediately go after I'm done settling my business here. When Ling Feilong saw the person who had arrived, he respectfully went up to welcome him with a smiling face. How much longer do you need? I don't have that much time to waste. Zhou Yuhu wrinkled his brows, impatiently saying. He was parted from his duties as team leader today all because of that Yifeng character, and he had only recently risen to level 2. Afterward, he was even given a scolding by Brother Zhang. These occurrences caused him to become greatly irritated deep within his heart. 2 to 3 minutes should be enough. Ling Feilong replied. He felt teaching Shifeng the ways to be a proper person should not be a big problem. Good, then hurry up, Zhou Yuhu demanded. Currently, Qin Shiyu's eyes unintentionally landed on Shifeng. Her expression was suddenly turning sour. She had no good impressions of Shifeng. He had neither money nor power. There was not the slightest feeling of safety or strength coming from him. When compared with Zhou Yuhu, the difference between the two was hundreds and thousands of miles apart. Shifeng even confessed to her without knowing his own worth. It was just an insult to her person, and as a result she was often made fun of by the other girls. Seeing the disgust on Qin Shiyu's face, Zhou Yuhu hooked up her chin with his robust hand, teasingly saying, "Baby, I'll take care of him for you immediately, lest he shows up in front of you again." Qin Shiyu faintly smiled as she nodded, not having any intention of stopping Zhou Yuhu. "Hey brat, come over here," Zhou Yuhu pointed his finger at Shifeng, loudly roaring. Everyone was shocked at seeing Zhou Yuhu's imposing manner. Who was Zhou Yuhu? He was ranked 3rd in the school's fighting tournament. He was much more powerful when compared to the 9th-ranked Ling Feilong. A single hit from him was enough to send a person to the hospital for half a month. Ling Feilong naturally understood what was happening before him. Zhou Yuhu was irritated by Shifeng and wished to take care of him. Originally, he too wanted to teach Shifeng a lesson and let the entire class know of his prowess. If he were to take care of Shifeng right now, not only would he be helping himself, but he would also be able to sell a favor to Zhou Yuhu. He would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Hence, Ling Feilong stepped forward and volunteered, "Brother Hu, no need for you to personally take action. Originally, I already wanted to teach this kid a lesson. Give me 30 seconds. Little long, so the matter you had to deal with before was this." Zhou Yuhu looked towards Shifeng in disdain. He licked his lips, saying with a cold smile, "Better to let me. I also wish to loosen my bones a little." Saying this, Zhou Yuhu walked towards Shifeng with a cold smile. Chapter 47. I think highly of you. Zhou Yuhu walked towards Shifeng in an imposing manner. He wanted to personally teach Shifeng a good, hard lesson this time. On previous occasions he always sent others to handle it for him. However, Shifeng still did not learn to be good. Today he wanted Shifeng to imprint this lesson onto his bones. The people present could all see the conclusion that was coming for Shifeng. In a society where the entire population underwent body training, fights between students were all too common. Even minor injuries were very common. As long as it didn't go overboard, it would not cause an incident. However, looking at Zhou Yuhu's current attitude, Shifeng would be staying in the hospital for at least a month. At that time, Shifeng would be wearing a cast while receiving his graduation certificate on the stage. "Hold it, Zhou Yuhu. This is our class. On what basis does an outsider like you have to come and bully someone from our class?" Zhao Ruoshi's delicate body suddenly blocked Shifeng. She was not the slightest bit threatened by Zhou Yuhu's imposing aura as she berated him. Zhou Ruoshi's actions unquestionably left everyone else in shock. They never imagined that the normally gentle and graceful Zhao Ruoshi would stand up for an inferior student. She was even challenging Zhou Yuhu. She had such a strong heart to be so brave. "Ruoshi, don't stir up trouble. Brother Hu only wishes to give Shifeng some pointers. This should be Shifeng's good fortune. Shifeng is always being bullied by others, but with Brother Hu's pointers he might have some growth and learn to be a proper person," Ling Feilong explained with a smile. Due to Zhao Ruoshi's above-average appearance and attractive curves, he long since treated her as his personal property. Never would he have imagined that she would stand up for Shifeng. Suddenly the rage towards Shifeng burned even greater in his heart. However, it would not be good for him to reveal that rage, so he simply tugged at Zhao Ruoshi's delicate hand. He wanted to pull her away, stopping her from being a hindrance. "Fellow student Ling Feilong, as the pride of the class, are you just going to watch as one of our classmates being bullied?" Zhao Ruoshi shook off Ling Feilong's hand, looking at him and asking angrily. She originally thought Ling Feilong was in possession of a good personality. He also performed exceptionally in the fighting competition, so she thought he was a good prospect. However, she didn't think that he was just a hypocrite. "Ruoshi, how could you say such a thing about me? You are misunderstanding. It isn't my fault that Shifeng does not know how to be a proper person. Now that brother who is going to teach him how to become one, it would be beneficial to him in the future, Ling Feilong said with a righteous expression as if everything occurring was for Shifeng's own good. You. Zhao Ruoxi was greatly angered by Ling Feilong. She promptly turned toward Shifeng saying, "Hurry up and leave. I'll hold him off. This little girl is interesting and very sexy. I like it." Zhou Yuhu's eyes started sizing up Zhao Ruoxi, liking very much what he saw. His lips could not help but curl up into an evil grin as his hand stretched to caress Zhao Ruoxi's delicate face. He was no longer paying any attention to Shifeng. However, before his salty pig hand could touch Zhao Ruoxi, it was slapped away by another. "Zhou Yuhu, since you wish to trade notes with me, I can agree. However, just trading notes would not have much meaning to it. How about we spice it up a little?" Shifeng proposed with a calm smile. He took a step forwards, tugging on Zhao Ruoxi's jade-like arm and pulling her to a side. Zhao Ruoxi did not react to Shifeng's actions at all. Until she was dragged behind him, she only then began to look at Shifeng's average stature in stunning shock. When did Shifeng become so manly? However, she also felt Shifeng was very foolish. How could he trade pointers with Zhou Yuhu? Now, Zhou Yuhu would have an excuse to teach Shifeng a lesson. Zhou Yuhu rubbed the reddened back of his hand and raged. He glared at Shifeng, suddenly discovering Shifeng's current appearance was very calm and stable. It was as if Zhou Yuhu was looking at an entirely different person. Before, Shifeng would easily be incited and get into fights with others. Now, however, not only was he not aroused, but he was also smiling happily. Was his brain damaged? Ling Feilong was deeply enraged when he saw Shifeng's stretched arm actually touching Zhao Ruoxi. He could not help but wish he could take action immediately. However, he still held it in. He was prepared to put Shifeng in his place in the future. "Kid, you actually dare to challenge me. Truly interesting. Then I'll wager 1,000 credits. If you win, the 1,000 credits will be yours to keep. If you lose, then kneel and apologize to me and also compensate me with 1,000 credits. How about it? Do you dare to agree?" Zhou Yuhu furiously smiled. He never thought Shifeng's brain was truly damaged, daring to even provoke him. Such a petty wager. Aren't you embarrassed from saying it out loud? Shifeng shook his head and snorted in disdain. Your guts sure have grown after not meeting for a few days. Say it then, what kind of wager do you want? Zhou Yuhu was angered into a laugh. He knew Shifeng was poor and he could not even afford the 1,000 credits. Now though, he had actually dared to increase the bargaining chip. Was he complaining that he didn't have a quick enough death? It seems his brain was truly wedged between a door. Didn't you win a membership card for the Big Dipper Training Center from the school's fighting competition? Use that as the wager. If I lose, I'll pay 10,000 credits to you a month later. If you don't have the courage to wager, then forget it. Shifeng provokingly said. In Shifeng's previous life, Zhou Yuhu showed off this membership card in front of others. Now, Shifeng could coincidentally use it to train his body. The Big Dipper Training Center was well known in Jianghu City. It had a great environment, and its training facilities were very thorough. The average person was not allowed to enter the training center at all, not to mention obtaining a VIP membership there. A normal membership was worth around 8,000 to 9,000 credits. Even if I wager this card, where would a poor wretch like you find that much money? I won't believe in empty words, Zhou Yuhu laughed coldly. Indeed, it was as Zhou Yuhu had said. Shifeng had not a penny on him at the moment, not to mention 10,000 credits. Hence why he had said he would pay a month later. However, Zhou Yuhu would clearly not believe him. Instead, Zhou Yuhu turned around to mock him. It would seem Shifeng's plan was going to be dashed this time. Shifeng, did you think I don't know about your living conditions? You are so poor you can't even afford to have a good meal, yet you're still pretending to be wealthy. Qin Shuyu shot Shifeng a glance, commenting in disdain. I'll pay the 10,000 credits, Zhao Ruoxi abruptly said. Ling Feilong's eyes turned crimson when he saw Zhao Ruoxi standing up once again. He couldn't help but wish he could get rid of Shifeng right this instant. Shifeng was also shocked. He looked towards Zhao Ruoxi, astonished. He did not understand how Zhao Ruoxi had that much money. He wasn't very clear of Zhao Ruoxi's family background either. Shifeng only knew that her family was relatively well off. However, Zhao Ruoxi was actually so believing of him, even to the degree of betting her money on him. Shifeng could not understand why she had done so. To begin with, the relationship between the two of them wasn't that great. Zhao Ruoxi looked at Shifeng. She knew the reason for Shifeng's astonishment. However, to not let him misunderstand, she quietly explained, "I'm only lending you the money because I can't stand Zhou Yuhu's arrogant attitude. I think highly of you, so even if you lose, lose with dignity." "Thank you. I will definitely return twice the amount to you," Shifeng gratefully said. This money was very important to him. Now Zhou Yuhu would definitely agree to the wager. After Shifeng obtained the membership card, he would be able to regularly train his body. It was better to start training earlier rather than later. The earlier Shifeng could train his body, the larger the benefit it would have to his future. Zhao Ruoxi had helped him greatly this time. When he started earning money in God's domain, paying Zhao Ruoxi an extra 10,000 would even be considered too little. However, Zhao Ruoxi did not take Shifeng's words seriously. She only nodded with a smile. She did not think that Shifeng could return her money, not to mention double the amount. Interesting. Then let's draw out the contract at the fighting arena. Zhou Yuhu licked his lips. He was even more interested in Zhao Ruoxi now. Although his luck in God's domain was bad today, his luck in real life was truly good. Not only had he found a good-looking girl, but he could also receive 10,000 credits for teaching Shifeng a lesson. It truly was a blessing in disguise. Following which, everyone arrived at the fighting arena built by the school. Shifeng and Zhou Yuhu signed a contract under the supervision of the central brain. Contracts acknowledged by the central brain were also recognized by the law. There was also a judge at the fighting arena. The judge was normally a teacher in the university who taught students how to fight. The judge also had good skills that would be used to promptly stop the fights to avoid any heavy injuries from occurring. The other students from the class stood below the fighting ring. They laughed at Shifeng's stupidity. Instead of being an invisible existence like usual, he actually went insane now. Not only did he oppose Ling Failong, but he also angered Zhou Yuhu, who was even more terrifying. After today, Shifeng might never live a peaceful life ever again. Qin Shuyu looked above the ring at the calm and steady Shifeng. The feeling he gave people was completely different from before. He currently radiated an indescribable sense of security. She even felt Shifeng's scrawny body had grown larger. Qin Shuyu quickly shook her head, mockingly saying, "How strong could a weakling who doesn't even know a single fighting technique be? He even dares challenge brother Hu now. He truly is reckless." Chapter 48, An Unequaled Fight. None of the students below the ring had refuted Qin Shuyu's words. Instead, they felt her words made sense. No matter what was said, Zhou Yuhu was ranked third in the university's fighting tournament. He was also highly praised by several teachers who taught fighting. They predicted Zhou Yuhu would be able to create a reputation for himself in the upcoming city's fighting tournament, not to mention teaching the weak and scrawny Shifeng a lesson. It was like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Even though he remains unyielding right now, I guess Shifeng will kneel and beg for mercy in a moment. Does that even need to be mentioned? Why don't you look at who Zhou Yuhu is? My guess is Shifeng will be lying on the floor within 10 seconds. The male students in the class started to laugh as they discussed Shifeng's end. What is wrong with you people? Is this how you treat a classmate of yours? Zhao Ruoxi asked, looking at her classmates with a furious expression. The students all turned silent. However, their eyes revealed a hint of disdain when they looked at Zhao Ruoxi. One of the gorgeously dressed girls in the class curled her lips in disdain, softly saying, "You just have somewhat good looks. If it wasn't for Brother Long, who do you think would listen to your words?" The other girls promptly nodded their heads. They were not taking their class monitor seriously at all. Although the female students spoke in soft tones, everyone present could hear them clearly. To the side, Ling Failong felt invigorated as he enjoyed listening to their words. Zhao Ruoxi turned her head away in a rage, no longer paying attention to these people. Ling Failong walked over to her and gently said, "Ruoxi, I know that you have no choice in this matter as the class monitor. However, Shifeng is the one finding trouble here, so you can't just blame everyone. Moreover, nobody believes Shifeng can win with that small body of his. You are literally throwing your money into the ocean. In a moment, I'll talk it over with Brother Hu to not take your money and let Shifeng pay for everything. Indeed, I am helping Shifeng because I am the class monitor. However, regarding the matter with the money, I have never thought of asking for it back from him." Zhao Ruoxi glanced at Ling Failong coldly saying, "On the other hand, you're the one who has taken the recommendation that is rightfully Shifeng's. Instead of helping Shifeng now, you're here making cynical remarks. Aren't you afraid of people criticizing you behind your back? Also, how can this be considered trading pointers? One is ranked third in the school, while the other is a student who doesn't even know any fighting techniques. Do you not feel any shame when you speak of this?" Zhao Ruoxi's every word caused Ling Failong piercing pain. In addition, her elegant and refined complexion gave off an indescribable sense of strength that struck at Ling Failong's heart. Ling Failong was speechless as he turned pale from anger. Just as Zhao Ruoxi had said, every class had a fixed number of spots for the recommendation. Only students with results amongst the top 20 in the class were qualified for this recommendation. However, Ling Failong had managed to obtain the qualifications to participate in the city's fighting competition after much difficulty. If others were to know that he was a university student without a recommendation, it would be an absolute humiliation. The school had previously considered such reputational problems as well. Hence, they had made it so that the top 5 contestants of the fighting tournament would receive a recommendation, even if their studies were not good. However, Ling Failong was only 9th ranked, so naturally he could not obtain it. Hence, he had suggested such a matter to the school. Seeing that Ling Failong's results were in the top 30 of the class, not that far from the 20th place, the school had decided to agree to his request. However, the condition was someone had to willingly give up their recommendation. As for how he would get someone to give up their spot, that all depended on Ling Failong himself. Shifeng was just a weakling. Originally, Ling Failong had intended to utilize the collective intentions of the class, in addition to his own strength, to easily oppress Shifeng. Then, after giving Shifeng some benefits, this matter would be considered over. However, Shifeng's actions were completely different from what Ling Failong had imagined they would be. Shifeng had not taken him seriously in the slightest and had threatened him without hesitation. Now he was even ridiculed by Zhao Ruoxi. Ling Failong's heart was currently filled with an inextinguishable wrath. Correct, this isn't an equal fight. However, can Shifeng blame others for being weak himself? Who was the one who agreed to this competition? Surely you can't blame me for this. Ling Failong looked at Zhao Ruoxi with blood-red eyes. If Zhao Ruoxi did not have a beautiful appearance and attractive body, he would have long since sent a slap flying over. However, he endured it. Using force was definitely not a smart move. Moreover, Zhao Ruoxi's family background was not simple at all. If he caused an incident now, his entire life would be over. Also, when Ling Failong thought about how he could toy with Zhao Ruoxi in the future, the rage in his heart calmed down slightly. "Brat, after making me take such a loss, just you wait and see," Ling Failong glared at Shifeng, silently swearing. Above, in the fighting ring, Shifeng only smiled in disdain when he felt the hostility coming from Ling Failong. However, he had to agree to one of Ling Failong's words. This was indeed an uneven fight. In Shifeng's previous life, although his physique was not comparable to those first-rate fighters, he could still beat them into submission. The thing he relied on to win was the life-or-death battles in God's domain. What was a 100-battle hero? After living through 100 wars, it would be hard not to become an expert hero. It was the same with many martial artists. Their training usually involved pushing themselves to the edge, using the feeling of having their lives hanging by a thread to train and improve themselves. However, such a method was too dangerous. The average person would definitely not do such a thing. It was extremely easy to go overboard and lose their lives. After Shifeng went through extremely realistic life-or-death battles, the increase to his battle experience and techniques rapidly grew. His skills in battle even exceeded the national fighting competition standards by several levels. In 10 years' time, any reputable melee player in God's domain could easily defeat the current fighting champion of Jianghu City, not to mention Shifeng, who was once the captain of Shadow. In Shifeng's eyes, the university's fighting tournament was just like children playing house. Moreover, regarding physique, his current body exceeded his body 10 years later. Fighting would not be a problem, even if he had to face up to 5 or 6 Ling Failongs. "Brat, you sure are carefree to be looking around? Watch how I'll fix you up," Zhou Yuhu said, rushing at Shifeng. He immediately sent a slap towards Shifeng's face, intending to humiliate him first. Naturally, Shifeng could easily see through such an action. However, Shifeng stood unmoving even though he was facing off against someone much stronger than he was. Shifeng sent out a casual punch towards Zhou Yuhu's face, completely ignoring Zhou Yuhu's slap. Zhou Yuhu never imagined that Shifeng's fist would have such precision, aiming directly at his face. Instinctively, Zhou Yuhu had used his hands to block off this fist. Shifeng's lips curled upwards when he saw Zhou Yuhu's actions. With lightning speed, Shifeng's hand chopped towards Zhou Yuhu's neck. Zhou Yuhu failed to react in time as he received a chop to his neck. With the precision of a surgery blade, Shifeng's hand hacked at a major artery in Zhou Yuhu's neck. Suddenly, Zhou Yuhu felt his vision blurring. There was a sense of suffocating as Zhou Yuhu felt all his strength leaving his body. Shifeng did not give Zhou Yuhu time to catch his breath. Immediately, he sent another punch flying towards the side of Zhou Yuhu's abdomen. Zhou Yuhu wanted to block the attack, but his body refused to listen to his thoughts. He could only feel a stabbing pain in his intestines as a stream of yellowish liquid shot out from his mouth. Zhou Yuhu's vision became a blur. He could not cry out even if he wanted to. Zhou Yuhu's body instinctively wished to fall, but Shifeng did not give him such a chance. Fist after fist landed on Zhou Yuhu's abdomen, followed by a few more landing on his ribs. After receiving a series of consecutive punches, the acidic juices in Zhou Yuhu's stomach had been completely drained out of his mouth. Then his body fell to the ground like a dead dog. The entire arena suddenly became silent. Everything had happened all too quickly. It was so quick that not one person had even reacted. Only after Zhou Yuhu was laying on the ground, did the judge of the match finally react. Immediately he declared the end of the fight and Shifeng the winner of it. At the same time he hurriedly ran over to Zhou Yuhu's side to check on him. The judge truly could not imagine it. Zhou Yuhu, the third-ranking student in the university's fighting competition, was not even a match for such a weak-looking youth. By no means was Zhou Yuhu too weak. Instead, the weak-looking youth was just too strong. After watching several of Zhou Yuhu's matches, the judge knew that he was very strong. At the very least, it would not be easy for the judge to deal with him. After looking at Zhou Yuhu's injuries, the judge was dumbfounded. Shifeng's techniques were just too horrifying. Every one of his moves was perfectly measured, breaking only 2 to 3 of Zhou Yuhu's ribs but not heavily injuring him. Zhou Yuhu only needed more than a month's time for his chest to heal up. Chapter 49, A New Light. Seeing Zhou Yuhu unmoving on the ground, it was clear he had lost consciousness. The teacher then reported that Zhou Yuhu had no major injuries, and he would wake up in a moment. However, his injuries still needed to be tended to. Also, he had to rest for more than a month. As for the city's fighting competition that would be held in 3 weeks, Zhou Yuhu could forget about joining. Everyone's sights shifted toward Shifeng. They looked at his thin and weak body, sucking in a cold breath when they recalled the explosive and terrifying strength it was capable of displaying. When they thought about the words they said to Shifeng before, cold sweat started pouring out from their backs without stop. Currently, the expression in the male students' eyes as they looked at Shifeng had completely changed. There was no longer any ridicule or contempt contained within them. Instead, there was a deep fear. The third-ranking student in the school was actually defeated in a single exchange. Who else could become Shifeng's opponent? If Shifeng wished to take care of them, the consequences they would face would be unimaginable. On the other hand, they had actually dared to gift Shifeng's recommendation to Ling Feilong. Thinking up to this point, the hearts of the hot-blooded warriors from before started to beat madly. Under the Central Brain's witness, Shifeng received the membership card for the Big Dipper Training Center and 10,000 credits. Following which, he circled a glance at the people below the ring. When a few of the less courageous male students were met with Shifeng's deep and profound eyes, their legs suddenly turned weak as they lost consciousness, foam appearing at their mouths. "Teacher, not good. Little Lu has fainted." Before this sentence could finish being said, another male student lay flat on the ground. Meanwhile, the male students that remained standing started becoming scared in their hearts. Shifeng was just too terrifying. He actually shocked 2 male students into unconsciousness just by looking them in the eye. However, they were also envious of the 2 that lost consciousness. If they had fainted over, they wouldn't have to bear such a pressure right now. Currently, the air surrounding them was still as if frozen. Breathing was starting to become a difficulty for them, and even their limbs felt heavy as if they were filled with lead. As for the female students in the class, they were all dumbfounded. Their heads quickly lowered when they saw Shifeng looking over. They felt uncomfortable throughout their bodies as if they were frightened rabbits that were being stared at by a big gray wolf. Qin Shuyu's delicate mouth widened. She rubbed her eyes, verifying what she saw over and over. Only then did she understand that Zhou Yuhu was struck unconscious by Shi Feng. Shi Feng was just too powerful. Why had she never discovered so before? If she could be with a man such as this, her sense of security would be off the charts. Just thinking about it had made her happy. As for money, that would not be a problem. Just based on his strength alone, Shi Feng could definitely get into the city's fighting tournament. Entering into the top 10 would also not be a problem. When that time came, there would definitely be many requests for him to become a celebrity spokesperson. When Qin Shuyu saw that Shi Feng was looking over, she slightly tidied up her clothes and hair, appearing neat and moving. She also revealed deep cleavage, feebly saying, "Brother Feng, it's noon already. I know a good restaurant that has a great environment and good-tasting food. I'll treat you, so let's go there and have a try." However, Shi Feng did not pay Qin Shuyu any attention. Instead, he was looking for Zhao Ruoshi. When he found Zhao Ruoshi, he immediately walked over, completely ignoring Qin Shuyu. Seeing Shi Feng's cold and indifferent eyes, Qin Shuyu suddenly felt she had lost something very important. It was as if a knife stabbing at her heart. She regretted being blind and foolish when she was in high school. "Class monitor, here's your 10,000 credits. I'll repay the remaining 10,000 credits as fast as I can." Shi Feng handed the money over, speaking with a calm smile. However, Zhao Ruoshi would not receive it. She blinked her attractive eyes as she looked at Shi Feng as if she was looking at an exotic animal. There was both shock and joy contained within them. "Are you really Shi Feng?" Zhao Ruoshi asked in a quiet and uncertain tone. Throughout Zhao Ruoshi's 4 years in university, her impression of Shi Feng was one of an introvert. He was often bullied by others. He also appeared very prideful, never receiving help from others. He was like an injured little wolf, licking his own wounds alone. She had never imagined Shi Feng's actions today would have such a great difference from before. She now viewed Shi Feng in a completely new light. Shi Feng had turned from being a little wolf into a slumbering dragon. He was unassuming when slumbering but amazing when he took action. Even Zhao Yuhu, the third-ranking student in the entire university, was no match for him. If he had entered the school's fighting tournament, he might have already become the champion by now. "Of course I am Shi Feng. Class monitor, why would you ask such a question? Could it be that I am just too handsome and different from my previous appearance?" Shi Feng joked. He naturally understood Zhao Ruoshi's thoughts. He had attracted too much attention today. However, even Shi Feng himself did not wish for such a situation to occur. The developments up to this point were all unintentional. Don't get cocky. You are just barely able to enter my eyes." Zhao Ruoshi immediately snatched the money from Shi Feng, her fair and delicate face revealing a calm smile. As if she had thought of something, she quietly said, "The fellowship party hosted by the university is in 10 days. There will also be the upper echelons of well-known corporations in Jianghu City attending the party. Aren't you trying to find a profitable career? This is a good chance, so you should consider attending." The moment Zhao Ruoshi finished speaking, she thought of Shi Feng's financial situation. He definitely did not have the money to attend the party. Hence, she quietly said, "As for the fee required to participate in the fellowship party, I can pay it for you." Shi Feng gave Zhao Ruoshi's words some thought. The fellowship party hosted by Jianghu University annually was a big event, and that person might even participate in this party. Hence, Shi Feng nodded his head in agreement, saying, "Thank you, class monitor. I'll go. As for the participation fee, I'll pay that myself." Zhao Ruoshi was slightly glad when she heard Shi Feng agreeing to go. However, there was an indescribable sense of disappointment when she heard Shi Feng saying that he would pay the participation fee on his own. The conversation between the two was also heard by everyone else. However, everyone doubted their hearing when they heard their class monitor, Zhao Ruoshi, actively invite Shi Feng to the fellowship party. She was even willing to pay for his participation fee. Zhao Ruoshi was a truly beautiful woman, only she normally made no efforts to enhance her looks with makeup. Her clothing was also very common. However, it was still unable to mask her elegant and refined face and exquisite body. As long as she dressed herself up somewhat, even the school's top beauty might not be her match. Hence, there were quite a few rich and influential men who tried pursuing Zhao Ruoshi. However, every one of them was rejected. Ling Failong was the only one who had managed to shorten the distance between them after much difficulty. However, it was only to the degree of getting Zhao Ruoxi to treat him somewhat better. Zhao Ruoxi's pridefulness was clear to behold. Now, however, Zhao Ruoxi had actively invited Shi Feng. It was an absolutely jaw-dropping scene. With such a beauty inviting them, who could refuse? However, Shi Feng had tactfully rejected Zhao Ruoxi's kind intentions. By the side, the wrathful flame in Ling Feilong's heart burned madly as he listened in on the two's conversation. Shi Feng, one must properly know one's own worth. There will be many great figures of Jianghu City attending the fellowship party. Just based on the clothes you are wearing, the security might even chase you away. At that time you'll embarrass everyone in our class, Ling Feilong mockingly said. You don't have to worry about this point, fellow student Ling Feilong. Shi Feng turned to look at Ling Feilong. He pointed towards the ring, a cold glint flashing past his eyes as he coldly said, On the contrary, didn't you say you wanted to teach me how to become a proper person before? This place is the fighting arena, so why don't we exchange some pointers? Teach me how to become a proper person. Shi Feng. You. Don't get ahead of yourself. I am only following the suggestion of the entire class. Ling Feilong stuttered as he looked at Shi Feng with hesitant eyes. He suddenly felt chills throughout his body, inadvertently retreating a step back. Having him exchange pointers with Shi Feng was just digging his own grave. For those who have never participated in a fighting competition, they would not be able to know the true meaning and horror of the exchange between Shi Feng and Zhou Yuhu. Zhou Yuhu was very powerful, and even Ling Feilong himself knew he was definitely not a match to Zhou Yuhu. However, Zhou Yuhu was still dispatched by Shi Feng within a moment. This fight could not even be considered a proper fight. It was just a one-sided play. The suggestion of the entire class? Shi Feng swept a glance towards his classmates standing to the side, coldly saying, What were your suggestions? Naturally, everyone would not stand on Ling Feilong's side. Even an idiot could tell how afraid Ling Feilong was of Shi Feng. Fine, I admit defeat. It was I who was blind. You tell me what's to be done. Ling Feilong looked above the ring at the unconscious Zhou Yuhu, gritting his teeth while saying, If he were to come into conflict with Shi Feng right now, he would not have any chance of resisting. He also did not believe that Shi Feng would show mercy. If he had continued offending Shi Feng, he would definitely be laying on a hospital bed for at least a month. When that time came, he would not be able to even participate in the city's fighting tournament, and such a loss was not something he was willing to bear. The 5,000 credits voucher for the Big Dipper Training Center awarded by the school, Shi Feng demanded. The Big Dipper had the best nutritionist in Jianghu City. With this voucher, Shi Feng could replenish the nutrients required by his body and quickly improve his physique. Ling Feilong was extremely unwilling to give away the Big Dipper voucher. This was an item that could not be bought outside even with 10,000 credits. After receiving the voucher, Shi Feng left the fighting arena. Shi Feng started training his body immediately after returning to his rented apartment. After tiring himself out, he looked for information related to God's domain and Jianghu City on the internet. He was making ample preparations for his future development plan. It was especially true for the fellowship party this time around. He had to prepare sufficient information before the fellowship started. Otherwise, it would be too hard to carry out his plan. When noon came, Shi Feng ate his lunch and lay on the bed. He wore his virtual gaming helmet, starting his second day in God's domain. Chapter 50, The Popular Garrison Armor. Dark clouds hovered over the skies of Red Leaf Town, surrounding the full moon that hung in midair. On the streets, magic lamps brightly lit up the town. Shi Feng had just logged in. It was still nighttime in God's domain. A majority of the players were currently in the trade area, making the place very crowded. There were only a scant few experts who would hunt for monsters to level up at this time of day. During the daytime, the street of the trade area was desolate. However, that street had currently turned into a bazaar, bustling with noise and excitement. Players could be seen setting up stalls throughout the wide cobblestone street, and above their white sheets of cloth were some items required by auxiliary jobs and also a few pieces of common equipment. Buyers and sellers were bargaining with each other, and some faces even turned crimson over 1 or 2 coppers. System: the garrison armor you have placed on auction has been sold. After deducting the processing fees, a total of 5 silvers 31 coppers has been added to your inventory. System: the garrison armor you have placed on auction has been sold. After deducting the processing fees, a total of 5 silvers 67 coppers has been added to your inventory. System: the garrison armor you have placed on auction has been sold. After deducting the processing fees, a total of 5 silvers 98 coppers has been added to your inventory. Before Shifeng had taken a step forward, a series of auction house notifications from the system entered his ears. Shifeng casually selected the system notifications to appear, immediately becoming shocked. The garrison armor's value had totally exceeded Shifeng's estimates. Originally, Shifeng intended to have it sold for, more or less, 5 silvers. In reality, however, due to the competition and price growing fiercer, the garrison armor reached a maximum price of 6 silvers 42 coppers. The 11 garrison armors sold for a total of over 67 silver coins. The amount immediately turned Shifeng into the owner of a gold coin. He had become a goldenaire. At the current phase of the game, the purchasing power of a single silver coin was astonishing. For a second-rate guild, their circulating funds would only amount to 60 or 70 silver coins. To properly develop their normal members during the initial periods of the game, the guilds were unable to stock up on too many copper coins. Such an action would only hamper the guild's future development. As for first-rate guilds, their circulating funds might only be around 1 gold coin. However, these funds would seem insignificant when it was used on tens or hundreds of people. Now Shifeng was a true tycoon. After a day of battle, a majority of the players were currently returning to town with their spoils of war. These players carried a lot of materials on their persons, and naturally Shifeng would not let this chance get away. Shifeng casually chose a location with few people, setting his white cloth on the ground and starting up his stall to purchase materials. The highest leveled player right now should be at level 4, whereas the average player was still at level 2 and expert players at level 3. Hence, the materials they sold varied greatly. There were high-ranking goods and there were also common goods. The current prices for high-ranking materials were very expensive, so Shifeng would naturally not buy them. Shifeng relied solely on himself to make the garrison armor, so the money he could earn was limited. However, Shifeng was just selling these pieces of equipment to accumulate some funds. Only when he had the funds could he earn more money. Buying magic essence 6 coppers a stack, stones 10 coppers a stack. Also buying hard stones 23 coppers a stack, Shifeng shouted. After hearing Shifeng's words, the players on the street crowded around him, one after another. Boss, I have 10 stacks of stones. How many stacks do you want? I have 6 stacks of magic essence. Do you want all of them? I have a stack of hard stones. After grinding in the wild for an entire day, magic essences and stones had become materials that polluted the street. Normally, players would sell these materials to NPCs or save them up for practicing their own auxiliary jobs. However, materials such as hard stones were very rare. They were usually found in level 3 areas, only being dropped by kobolds or little rock monsters. There were 20 pieces of hard stones in a stack, and they were worth 20 coppers when sold to NPCs. Hard stones were used in forging. However, it was quite luxurious to use them at this stage of the game. Guilds very rarely purchased hard stones, so their prices were not very high. However, they would have a great purpose once players reached level 7. There were many special monsters in the level 7 monster areas, and it was extremely taxing on the durability of a weapon to fight against these monsters. A weapon would break when its durability reached 0. Once a weapon was broken, the chance of successfully repairing it was only around 20%. If failed, it would turn into scrap. Meanwhile, hard stones could be used to make whetstones. When used on a weapon, it could temporarily increase its damage. More importantly, it could recover a weapon's durability by 5 to 10 points. With the whetstone, players did not have to return to town just to repair their weapons, saving them a lot of time and also increasing their monster grinding efficiency. In Shifeng's previous life, hard stones were sold with extreme popularity. The price of whetstones increased with even greater speed, allowing many forgers to make a hefty profit. To quickly increase their levels and gain an advantage, Shadow Guild had also been butchered by those sharks. They could only grit their teeth as they bought the whetstones. In this life, it was Shifeng's turn to make a huge profit. He was going to stock up these hard stones in advance. After purchasing materials for over an hour, Shifeng had a total of 80 stacks of magic essence and 120 stacks of stones. As for hard stones, Shifeng had only collected 12 stacks of them, a very small amount. Shifeng's bag was quickly filled. He had no choice but to make a trip to the bank's warehouse to store all these items. The bank's warehouse had a fixed space of 500 slots. Expanding the warehouse's space for the first time would give an additional 500 slots at the cost of 20 coppers. The second time was 1,000 slots for 50 coppers. Afterward, every 1,000 slots would cost 1 silver coin, and every additional 1,000 slots would result in a management fee of 10 copper coins per week. Currently, such an amount of money was nothing to Shifeng. Immediately, Shifeng expanded 3,000 slots, and in the future he would have to pay a processing fee of 30 coppers every week. After storing all the materials, Shifeng ran towards the auction house. The auction house linked together all the small towns under the influence of White River City. Although there were few people who sold common materials here, there would surely still be some people who sold hard stones. Only the prices they set were slightly higher. However, players would have no choice but to buy whetstones for their weapons when they reached level 7. So, Shifeng wasn't concerned about the loss of money. After arriving at the auction house, Shifeng discovered a very peculiar situation. There were quite a lot of logistics members of guilds present at the auction house. Each and every one of them were standing guard at the auction house, and it was a wonder what they were actually waiting for. Shifeng randomly chose a place to sit down, calling out the operating panel of the auction house. Just when Shifeng was searching for hard stones, he heard a few logistics members of guilds complaining to each other. How long more do we have to wait? Why is that garrison armor still not showing up? Let me buy it so I can report back. You've only waited for 3 hours. I've already been waiting here for more than 10 hours. You haven't seen the intensity of the competition for the garrison armor. I've heard, because of this garrison armor, there were quite a few guilds who were able to kill many wild special elites, reaping astonishing gains. There was even a guild that managed to obtain quite a few pieces of equipment and skill books, thanks to the garrison armor. So, everyone is here to fight over it. Unfortunately, the remaining few pieces of garrison armor have all been bought. Exactly. Our guild is currently regretting it dearly. If we had known how greatly we would fall behind to those guilds, we would have bought the garrison armor, even if we had to pay 7 silver coins for one. Now the higher-ups have already given the order. As long as the garrison armor appears, we definitely must buy it. During the discussion held by the logistic members, Shifeng was also surprised by the speed of the garrison armor achieving his desired effect. Hence, Shifeng took out the remaining 7 garrison armor that possessed defensive power. He stealthily placed them on auction, setting the base price for each piece at 8 silver coins, 2 silver coins higher than his original estimation. However, these guilds should be able to accept such a price. As for the best garrison heavy armor, Shifeng would only sell it after a period of time has passed. He would first let these guilds slowly digest the current garrison armor. After placing the equipment on auction, Shifeng started searching for hard stones. Shifeng wondered if there were many players who had auctioned them off. Chapter 51, Competition at the Auction House. Shifeng called out the search panel, immediately entering the words hard stone. Suddenly, rows of information appeared on the semi-transparent screen. In a single glance, Shifeng could see over 100 stacks of hard stones being sold. There were many players selling them. When Shifeng saw a stack of hard stones selling for 1 gold coin, he felt such a player must have been driven insane by poverty. Immediately, Shifeng filtered the display to show prices from lowest to highest. After adjusting the display, the cheapest stack of hard stones still cost 26 coppers. After deducting the processing fees of the auction house, players could still receive 25 coppers. As expected, the prices were a lot higher than normal. However, Shifeng still had to buy them. He could afford them as long as the price was below 30 coppers. Suddenly, the number of hard stones available on the auction house had been reduced by a large half. The remaining ones were all selling for 30 coppers and above, and there was no spendthrift who would buy them. After looking at hard stones, Shifeng casually took at the miscellaneous section. Shifeng's eyes abruptly shone. There were actually card sets. Moreover, there was a large number of them. There was some chance for monsters to drop these card sets. However, the drop rate for it was extremely low. There was not even a 10,000 to 1 chance for one to drop. Monsters below level 10 were able to drop 12 card sets, and they were divided into 2 ranks, Bronze rank and Mysterious Iron rank. Warriors had Steel, Crusaders, and Insanity. Weapons specialists had Chaos, Vengeance, and Hurricane. Healers had Divine, Nature, and Noble. Mages had Element, Fool, and Demon. These 12 card sets each represented the 12 different jobs. Every set had 9 cards in them, and each card had a number behind them. As long as a player could gather a complete set, they could exchange it for a piece of set equipment for the respective job. Back in those days, a majority of the players did not know what these card sets were for. Moreover, there was no introduction for these card sets. Players, at that time, simply kept these card sets in their bags or sold them at the auction house. Only when the normal mode of the 50-man level 10 dungeon near the city was cleared, did these players discover there was actually an NPC that would trade for these card sets. Depending on the rank of the card sets, they could be traded for either bronze or mysterious iron set equipment. These set equipment were absolutely marvelous. A bronze set of equipment could rival an entire regular set of mysterious iron equipment, whereas a mysterious iron set of equipment could rival an entire regular set of secret silver equipment. So, these card sets that nobody cared about before suddenly turned ragingly popular overnight. Every card was sold at an astronomical price. Even so, many guilds were still frantic over them, constantly purchasing them. Meanwhile, there were hundreds of card sets currently displayed in front of Shifeng, yet there was actually nobody who wanted them. Each card was being sold at no more than 5 coppers, and even the maximum was 7 coppers. Shifeng bought them clean without hesitation. Shifeng did not think much of the cost. What's more, they would not increase in value even if he had left them in his bag. Using the money to grow money, now that was the way of the king. After Shifeng was finished with collecting hard stones and card sets, he was left with no more than 14 silver coins. Following which, Shifeng searched for skill books through the search panel. To determine a player's strength in God's domain, other than looking at their equipment, the number of skills they had learned was another factor. If a player possessed many skills, they could have a large variety of attack patterns to use in battle. An expert swordsman could usually utilize more than 20 skills in battle, whereas first-rate experts could use more than 40 skills in battle. As for the top-tier experts, they did not need to be mentioned. Shifeng was a first-rate expert, yet he possessed less than 10 skills. His condition was truly pathetic. However, there were very few skill books currently being sold. Under normal circumstances, players would usually use skill books on themselves or trade them for a skill they were able to use. Shifeng went through more than 10 pages in one go. As long as he saw a skill usable by swordsmen, he immediately bought them. When Shifeng arrived at the final page, his mind turned blank. Are you kidding me? Even defensive blade is being sold? Shifeng went wild with joy. The defensive blade was a swordsman's powerhouse skill. It was also a sure kill skill when dealing with mages. However, the skill also had a damnable drop rate. Even in his previous life, Shifeng only managed to get his hands on the skill after he was well over level 40. Shifeng truly did not imagine he would be able to see it now. Although the selling price was slightly high, 6 silvers was still acceptable to Shifeng. Shifeng immediately placed a bid of 7 silver coins, not wanting to waste too much time. Very quickly, Shifeng bought the skill for 7 silver coins. With the current purchasing power of 7 silver coins, Shifeng could buy 5 to 6 basic skill books. However, Shifeng spent them all on defensive blade without batting an eyelid. In addition to buying the rare skill, defensive blade, Shifeng also purchased 3 common skills: Observing Eyes, Windwalk, and Earth Splitter. On another note, while Shifeng was joyous over his purchase, the situation at the auction house started turning frantic. The logistic members of the various guilds were all crimson to their ears, their rage soaring to the skies. Crap, 9 silver coins still isn't enough to get this equipment. Which rich guild is it that paid 10 silver coins? You animals, why don't you take a look at my side? Someone's already bid 10 silvers and 65 coppers. These people are absolutely insane. I've only brought 10 silver coins with me. What should I do now that I can't complete my task? Abominable. They're hiding their names and placing only these few pieces of equipment on auction. How can I even snatch one? These people were the logistics members of unrated guilds. They were on the brink of insanity when they saw the larger guilds bid, each higher than the other. The most abominable person, however, was the creator of the equipment. Every time, this person only auctioned a few pieces of equipment. Previously, the competition over the equipment was already sufficiently intense. However, the garrison armor being auctioned right now had even better attributes, and their numbers were even less. The money they brought along to bid was absolutely insufficient, so how were they going to fight for the equipment? It can't be, right? Are there that many tycoons? Someone actually bid 11 silvers. Shifeng's joy reached the tips of his brows when he looked at how the garrison armor's price continuously increased. Within moments, the money he spent before had all been recovered, to the extent that it was more than before. Suddenly, Shifeng thought of the defensive blade. The average player definitely had no chance of obtaining such a rare skill for swordsmen, whereas guilds would not sell it even if they obtained it. The skill must have been sold by a certain guild to collect funds to buy the garrison armor. It's just that their actions once again benefited Shifeng. Within moments, all 7 garrison armors had their prices increased past 11 silvers. Such a price shocked even Shifeng himself. Where did so many powerful guilds suddenly come from? With the financial resources of such guilds, they ought to not spend that much money on a piece of bronze equipment. However, what Shifeng did not know was, after he had placed the garrison armors on auction, the logistics members of various large guilds reported the situation back to their guild leaders. Previously, these guild leaders saw the MT of other guilds tanking special elites with the garrison armor. These MTs were able to allow the other players to attack the special elites with ease, obtaining various skill books and bronze equipment, mysterious iron equipment even. At such a sight, the eyes of these guild leaders had long since turned red with envy. Unfortunately, they had no solutions to this matter. They wished to let the lifestyle players of their own respective guilds forge this equipment, yet they did not have the forging design for it. They also wished to contact the player who had forged these garrison armors, yet this player had hidden his name, preventing any means of contact. Their only choice was to watch on helplessly. Now, however, the garrison armor this time even possessed defensive power. They definitely must buy it. Hence, these guilds started gathering funds immediately. Do you hear me? You definitely must get it. Immediately bid 13 silver coins. I want to see who else dares to bid. What? Is it already at 13 silvers? Bid 13 silvers 50 coppers. I don't believe there is a guild that is wealthier than us. There were over 100 towns under the influence of White River City, and there were hundreds of guilds continuously bidding for the garrison armor. After half an hour, all 7 garrison armors were auctioned off, with the lowest being sold at 14 silvers 60 coppers. Shifeng earned more than 1 gold coin in an instant. Seeing how fervent these people were, Shifeng took the chance to place the garrison heavy armor on auction, setting its starting price at 16 silver coins. Following which, Shifeng left the auction house. It was still night and there was about half an hour before sunrise. It was very unwise to go out and level right now, so Shifeng went to the library in Red Leaf Town first. He wanted to have a better understanding of the diary, which contained elvish words, he obtained from the hell mode of the Deathly Forest. He might even obtain a new find. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.